UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yep, the name is Collins, Ian Collins. Welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Alex Phillips, back, of course, soon here on Talk. The home of common sense continues. We've got a plethora of debatable delights here this afternoon. Elon Musk accusing Kyiv of being a graft machine, feeding off Ukrainian soldiers' deaths, backing Donald Trump's decision to ignore President Zelensky in peace talks. This is turning out to be, I don't know whether I'm looking at the American administration thinking this is the best thing we've ever seen, or this is pantomime territory. Unsure. We'll look at that in more detail. Also, Britain is set to offer the EU an Australian-style youth mobility scheme as part of Keir Starmer's plans for a post-Brexit reset. Would you endorse such an idea of freedom of movement for the under-30s? And the BBC has finally pulled that controversial Gaza documentary accused of acting as a propaganda platform for Hamas. And it wasn't just the kid that fronted it, whose old man was a terrorist. There were so many other facets to this. It is an absolute howler for the BBC. More of that on the way. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. I want to talk about the EU thing in a second. Let me just throw that question out. Will America create a more peaceful world? Can I just ask that question very seriously? Will America create a more peaceful world? 0344 499 1000. I'm not a natural Trump supporter, and I don't think anyone, if you stop for a few moments to think about it, really would be, to be honest. You have to look at a lot of facets of the man. However, you know, we live in sort of slightly unconventional times. You know, in the same way that people who voted Remain should get behind Brexit, even if they voted Remain, because that is our direction of travel. You can't change that. And similarly with the United States. So you can say, well, I'm not... And I like the default position of not trusting politicians. I think it's an incredibly intelligent and a healthy disposition to take. To not, you know, I don't... Macron and Trump and Rishi and any of them. Your starting point for analysis must be, you know, forget how it makes you feel, think about what is actually happening. And so with Trump, what is actually happening are some very positive things. The world has been turned upside down in a matter of weeks under President Trump. And I think a lot of that has been really healthy. It doesn't matter whether you like him. You don't have to like your dentist, for God's sake. You just want him to do a good job. So there is that, and I think what is happening at the moment, you have this curious sort of cast of characters. It is sort of dysfunctional family territory, which often works rather well. So you've got Elon Musk, a bloke that was flogging electric cars half an hour ago, who's now at the top table over there in Washington, barking from the wings. You've got J.D. Vance, a man I've admired before most people had even heard of him, because I did do my due diligence. And you've got Mr. Trump himself. And these people don't talk in curious kind of pre-rehearsed platitudes like you often see with politicians, something that a SPAD, a special advisor, has written for them, a nice clinical press release to read out full of diplomatic language and a parlance of modernity and decency. No, they shoot from the hip. And that's to be encouraged in most respects. It does mean you get some unconventional responses, like, you know, instead of saying, well, you know, with respect, we thoroughly disagree with Mr. Zelensky. No, there's none of that. It's like, we think he's, like, playing off the death of soldiers. They're going right for the bullseye in this respect. So, yeah, I do want to know, will America create a more peaceful world? If you could answer that, 0344 499 1000. But I also want to throw this in as well, which is about the issue of the EU. Would a reciprocal arrangement with the EU on the under-30s have, on freedom of movement, be the answer to our immigration problems? Let me bring you the story here. So Britain is to offer, if this comes up, European countries an Aussie-style youth mobility scheme as part of Keir Starmer's reset with Brussels. This is widely been talked about for a long, long time, and it seems as if we're back onto it now. Under a plan to be tabled by British negotiators, tens of thousands of young EU workers and students will be able to come to the UK and live and work for 2 years with the possibility of a 1-year extension. The reciprocal scheme would allow young Britons aged 18 to 30 similar access to countries in Europe. The question I want to throw on this, because the instinctive answer is, oh, we can see what's going on here. This is like, get us back in, right? This is Starmer's way in. This was, like so many of these stories, a bit like the Renters Reform Bill, things like that. This stuff was happening under the Tories. Rishi Sunak had dabbled with this as well. The only thing I'd throw into the mix here, would this reciprocal arrangement with freedom of movement curiously be the answer to our immigration problems? Would, if you gave out 70,000, 100,000 visas a year, and the EU gave us 100,000 visas a year, then the people coming in would be those, our nearest neighbours, if you like, coming in to temporarily work. Do you know those unskilled jobs we keep hearing about? Would they be taking up those kind of jobs? Would that be the better option than what we currently have? So it'd be legal immigration for a limited period of time. You don't get any benefits. You don't have full access to the NHS, by the way, under this scheme. Would you support that scheme? And would it be partially an answer to our immigration problems? 0344 499 1000. And look who's just turned up in our studio. As if by magic, Charlie Downs is back with us. How are you, Charlie?
I'm very well, Ian. How are you?
Good to see you. You are under 30.
Correct.
Which means you could benefit hugely from this scheme. You could be legging it to Madrid or Barcelona or Paris or Bruges or any Amsterdam, anywhere you like. Lisbon, anywhere in the EU. Under Keir's scheme, if it comes up, if it works, which would allow you 2 or 3 years ability to go and work elsewhere, good or bad?
Well, I am quite often tempted to go back into academia and study and get a master's or something like that. But to be honest, I think my time in academia is done. You know, it's in the past, and now I'm in the real world, I like to think. But
I think you were in the real world from about 12, to be honest, Charlie. I think you were ready to go at that stage.
Well, maybe. But I mean, I think this scheme, it's all about context, isn't it? Because actually, in principle, I actually quite like this idea. I think that there was around Brexit, there was a real undercurrent of xenophobia against Europeans, which I think is really deeply misplaced, right? I think there is this kind of post-war boomer narrative that the French are cowards and the Germans are our enemies and all this sort of thing. But actually, that's just I think that's just an outdated view of the world. I think that these people are our friends and we should be seeking good relations with them. And actually, we have so much shared history with the continent, with France, Germany, Spain, etc., that it makes sense for us to work together, and it makes sense for us to, within limits, have some degree of movement. Now, obviously, under free movement, that degree of movement was far too high, and I think people were rightly opposed to that, especially when Brexit was right at the forefront of the national conversation. But now we're in a situation, when we talk about immigration, where we've been completely inundated with people from all over the world for many years at this point, and it's fundamentally transformed the character of certain parts of this country. It has led to our economy slumping. Public services are grinding to a halt. You can't get places in the NHS. Parents can't find places for their children in schools. Housing is getting more expensive. Wages are decreasing. And so if we were in a more prosperous time, I'd actually support this policy that Starmer's talking about. You know, I think there's a conversation to be had. But now is not that time. Right?
I always thought we slightly missed a trick, that if we were going to have a level of immigration of people coming here, then the best place for them to come from would be the EU.
Well, of course. I mean, it doesn't
that would make sense to me. Right now, we've got 10,000 different nationalities turning up with no real way of assessing any sort of social cohesion there, how long people are here for, what are their real reasons for coming. You know, a 20-year-old Frenchman or a German girl or Spaniard or somebody from Portugal, wherever, I can understand why they want to stick a backpack on, come to the UK. Do you know, I'm going to work in Costa and God knows where for a couple of years, see the place and then go back home. I can't claim any benefits. I can totally see why that would be a thing.
Yes.
Somebody saying, I'm coming from Eritrea, then I would immediately think, well, you might have a different reason for coming here, even if it's an understandable one from their position. So I think we would know where we are on this a little bit.
Well, this is an issue of crucial importance that still isn't really happening in the halls of power, which is to draw qualitative distinctions between different cultures, right? Because there is nothing wrong with saying that we would rather have French people coming here than people from the Middle East and North Africa, because there's a greater degree, as I've said already, of shared history, cultural proximity, shared values between ourselves and the French, or indeed the Germans, or the Spanish, or the Portuguese, or and so on. And it's therefore more realistic and more, I think, socially, culturally, economically healthy to invite people in from those regions of the world than ones where their value systems are fundamentally different, where their economic situation is fundamentally different, where they are going to be more prepared to take lower wage jobs which push the wages down for everybody else in Britain. And so, until we are prepared to, until our leaders are prepared to address the fact that there are some cultures that are better than others, there are some cultures that are more well-suited to life in the British Isles than others, I just
That's
don't
the
think
bit that people have been scared to say, isn't it? Kemi Badenoch actually said it at the beginning of the week, I think, at the Conservative conference, not the Conservative Party conference. Yes, ARC. The problem with this, or the question mark over this reciprocal movement of young people scheme, is whether this is a kind of step one of Starmer's big plan to go back into the EU. It's worth having a listen and to remind ourselves what Keir Starmer said just at the tail end of last year about his great EU reset. Have a listen.
Are you about to betray Brexit?
No, we've been really clear from the get-go that this isn't about re-entry to the EU. It's not about going back to the old rules of the single market, the customs union, freedom of movement, etc. So we've been very clear about that. But within that, yes, we do want to reset. I want to make sure that we get a better deal for the British people, for your readers, so that they feel better off, they've got a better public services, and I think we can do that with a reset.
So what does a reset look like, Charlie? I mean, is there something else going on here that we should be worried about?
Well, I think a man like Keir Starmer and his kind of style, the style of politics that he represents, which is this very dry, corporate, managerial view of the world, is perfectly aligned with the EU's view of the world. Have you noticed, by the way, that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer speak with the exact same intonation? They almost have the exact same voice.
Yes.
I can't help but think it now whenever I hear them.
And Ed Miliband is kind of almost in the tent as well on that one.
Yeah. I mean, they sound like the regional manager of the UK, as if it is just an economic zone, a balance sheet, to be understood in terms of profit and loss. But no, I think that Keir Starmer's revealed preference is very much closer alignment with Brussels, which, in the abstract, I'm really conflicted on this, because I think actually, in principle, the idea of some kind of supranational union between the European countries is not a terrible idea, right? Because as I said already, we have so much shared history with these countries, we have so many shared interest and shared culture with these countries that it seems to make sense to me that we have some degree of formalised cooperation, right? But the European Union in its current form is disastrous for the European continent, right? They have been the architects of mass migration, they have been the architects of deindustrialisation, of over-regulation, of the destruction of industry across the continent, and the outsourcing of manufacturing to places like China and India. And so the current EU does not have the best interests of Britain at heart. But were essentially a conservative-minded EU to come into existence, and it's looking like that may well happen with the insurgency of the AfD in Germany, 100%. The National Rally in France, and so on. If the EU was to take on a more conservative right-wing flavour, and if the interests were to realign with those of ordinary people, I don't see why a realignment with Brussels would be such a bad thing. But the fact of the matter is we're not in that situation yet. And Keir Starmer and his vision of the world is just more of the same. It's more of what the EU has already been. And I think that people are rightly angry about his desire to realign with that.
I mean, the reality is he couldn't go back in now because the sheer cost of reversing everything again would be off the scale. We'd be we're already bankrupt, for God's sake. We'd be bankrupt for another million years. Let's move on to this one. Elon Musk echoing Donald Trump's criticism of the Ukrainian President Zelensky, accusing him of running a, quote, fraud machine and cancelling elections to avoid losing. Let's have a listen to Trump's comments on Zelensky yesterday.
Modestly successful comedian, President Zelensky talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that basically couldn't be won. He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast, or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast, because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war.
There it is. I mean, they're pulling no punches. I said at the beginning, Charlie, I don't know if you were able to hear that, but this is all very unconventional stuff in the way they're talking. Elon Musk, you know, chipping in with those comments about, you know, feeding off the blood of dead soldiers, essentially. Sometimes you almost need a shake-up and a complete 360 in order to make stuff happen. So this isn't the kind of diplomacy we're used to seeing. In fact, it's not diplomacy at all. It's the almost antitheses of. But is it the right approach? Because some of this stuff might just work.
Well, I think the first thing to say is there's an emerging discourse around specifically Trump and Elon Musk, which is saying that there is the possibility with rhetoric like this that they are going to actually essentially go too far and put people off of the kind of politics, the kind of political revolution that they represent, which actually would be a bad thing in the long run. And I think that the narrative of the meat grinder stacking dead bodies and all the rest of it, I don't know. I think that to ordinary people, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that, by the way, but I think to ordinary people this does sound quite extreme. And then more to, you know, to actually address the point of Zelensky. Now, I am no fan of Zelensky either. I think that his recent calls for a European army, which presumably would be overseen by Brussels, you know, the same Brussels that we were just talking about, that has been the overseers of the destruction of Europe, is a lunatic and ridiculous idea. However, with that being said, I do think that under exceptional circumstances, like a war, for instance, it's not unreasonable to not have elections, because elections and democracy itself is actually a source of instability in a country. Now, it may be necessary sometimes. There is a time and place for democracy, of course, but a war is not that time and place. So accusing Zelensky of being a dictator, to me, just seems very... I mean, are we to believe that if America was invaded, if America was engaged in a total full-scale war, that they would be ordered, you know, running elections as if they were in ordinary times? I just don't buy that.
Yeah. We know what happened to Churchill when there were elections after the war.
Prime example.
That's the time to do it, but not during.
Yes, yes. Now, yeah, with all that said, I mean, look, I think that we need to get real about this. Ukraine has lost this war, and the only thing that's happening now is more taxpayer money, primarily American, going into this regime that does seem to have a fair bit of corruption around it.
See, Trump's right on that point, isn't he? He's looking at the EU and going, hang on a second, these are your neighbours.
Yes.
And they're doing jack compared to what we're putting. We're putting absolutely billions of American taxpayers' money into something that's not on our own doorstep. This is not happening in Central America or something, or a state away from Washington. This is happening on the other side of the world, and America are disproportionately funding it.
Yes, and thousands of Ukrainian men are dying on the altar of this. And then this is to say nothing of the military-industrial complex that seems to underlie all of this. And, you know, certainly someone somewhere has made a great deal of money out of this conflict. And I think it is about time it was brought to an end. And actually, more to the point, when we're talking about Russia and Putin, I think it's really interesting how 20 years ago Putin was seeking to align himself with the West, right? There were talks even of Russia joining NATO, which is kind of crazy to think about now. But actually we, and I am going to say this, we pushed Russia away by essentially American foreign policy decisions and what amounts to imperialism through the organisation NATO and the EU, pushed Russia into the arms of a very different set of interests, that being, essentially the BRICS group: India, China, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, etc. And if, I just can't help but think that a united European continent, including Russia, is surely the most desirable outcome. Right now, I don't think that's on the cards for decades, most likely. But working towards that, I think that that's probably desirable.
Charlie Downs is with us. More stories on the way. We'll talk about that. It's more than an embarrassment for the BBC, that Gaza documentary. There's more news on that. And should a trans medic be made to, I suppose, display or be open about their past before they transitioned to another gender? Well, of course they should. Some say they shouldn't. What does Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, think about that? Details coming next. This is Talk.
we have seen is people from Albania, for crying out loud, creating gangs, coming over, exploiting our welfare system, making fake accounts and sending... I mean, we don't know the millions that they managed to defraud the welfare state from. So what can we do?
When I read it the first time, I thought, I can't agree with this. But it is true that if you spread your money around a whole load of bank accounts and not just have it in one or two banks, well, it starts to get a little bit tricky.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This in from Paula says, I know we have a massive immigration, social and economic crisis in the UK. Let's make it even worse. Dig the hole even deeper. Let's really commit national suicide. Let even more people into the country and allow more European migrants into the UK. Let's go really crazy. Well, I get that. I understand the sentiment of what Paul is saying. I think the whole point of this is that it would be very different to that, in the same way that we let 70,000 Australians into the UK every year and 70,000 Brits can go to Australia or something of that order. It would be that, and they'd have to be under 30, they can't claim any benefits, and you have to contribute to your health care as well. Charlie Downs is with us in the studio. Interesting one, this, Charlie. Wes Streeting has criticised the General Medical Council for allowing doctors who change gender to have their disciplinary records erased, calling for urgent reforms. Let's have a listen to Streeting on the wider issue of NHS wokery and what he had to say on that.
They also need the profession to help. And sometimes there are some really daft things being done in the name of equality, diversity and inclusion, which undermine the cause. For example, there was one member of NHS staff who was merrily tweeting a job ad online and saying part of her practice was anti-whiteness. And I just thought, what the hell does that say to the bloke up in Wigan who's more likely to die, earlier than his more affluent white counterparts down in London? We've got real issues of inequality that affect white working class people.
And there it is. I mean, it seems that Streeting gets it. I mean, the insanity of this, that you might have had some grubby things on your record as a medic, and then you change gender, and because you can't be, what's the phrase, dead named, I think, isn't it? Yeah. When you dare to even raise the fact that Michael used to be Michelle, but you discover that Michelle, had done some, not good things in the workplace. But once Michelle becomes Michael, no one's allowed to mention the bad things. But this is insanity, right?
Well, I think the first thing to say on this issue is I think we are going to begin to see the emergence of what I've started calling the post-progressive left, right? And this is embodied currently in people like Aaron Bastani, even George Galloway, Paul Embry, others like this, who are a return to a more traditional, socialist, working class rooted left. And I have a lot more time for those kinds of people, right? I actually hugely respect the people who I just listed. I think that they are far more authentic than this, the whole progressive thing we've seen over the last 10 years. But on this issue, we can't allow people, because those people who I just listed have always been solid on this stuff, right? Galloway, for example, Embry, but they're both guys they've never gone in for the progressive stuff. They've always understood that the constituency they're seeking to represent, that being the working class, don't care about any of that stuff, and they're actively opposed to it in a lot of cases. But when it comes to the level of slimy politicians like Wes Streeting, we can't allow them to get easy wins by just saying things that to the rest of us were perfectly obvious the entire time. Like, for example, we shouldn't be concealing the past. I don't know if we can say crimes. I don't know whether we're actually talking.
Well, you'd hope if it was that bad, there wouldn't even be a medic at all.
Well, one would hope, yeah. But
whatever it is,
past
that's on
failings.
The record.
Then, the idea that we shouldn't be considering past failings if somebody quote transitions, I think that's obviously blatantly obvious. But all the while we're still having a conversation where the notion of transitioning is even regarded as legitimate. We're still so far from reality, because the fact of the matter is, until we're prepared to confront the fact that the entire trans thing specifically is very obviously an expression of mental illness and not and it's not in the best interests of those people who are expressing those feelings to buy into and encourage and enable their mental illness. You know, we're not serious about this. And this is the key point. If you love somebody and if you care about somebody, then you're going to do the thing that is, you know, that is in their best interest.
100%.
And telling a quote, trans person, somebody who it was born, let's say a male who now believes that he's a female, that he is in fact a female, is deeply, I just think deeply wrong, because you're buying into that person's delusion, and it just doesn't have, it's like telling an anorexic person that they're not skinny enough. It's the same thing in my mind. Okay. And so we can't give these people, Streeting and co, easy wins on this issue. As tempting as it might be to say, oh, the left have finally got it.
They finally got it,
yeah.
yes. Let's move to this one then. We talked about this a lot yesterday. This is the BBC's Gaza documentary that caused a lot of controversy, and rightly so, after they discovered that it was fronted by a kid whose dad is a terrorist for Hamas. That was never mentioned. The BBC said we didn't even know about this, which makes it even worse that they didn't even know about it. It remained on iPlayer up until today. It's now gone. It's been removed. I don't know if heads are rolling on this. It was called Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. There was a whole load of things that was wrong with it, not just the kid whose dad was a senior member of Hamas, one of the camera crew, and David Collier, the investigative journalist, who we were hoping to speak to today, but he's just completely tied up with this, has done brilliant work in really looking into this. The BBC used the son of Hamas official as its official star. In addition, one of the camera crew who followed the kid around posted celebrations of October the 7th atrocities. So there's that. He says these pro-Hamas agents are the people the BBC paid and relied on for integrity over their documentary. And there were a whole load of other issues as well. Did some of these people get paid, for example? Licence payers' money in order to talk? How did this ever happen? I mean, this is... You know, Harvey wants to go, oh, it's a bit bonkers, this. It's more than that. This is terrible.
Well, this is what's interesting about the Israel-Hamas war. Now, ordinarily, when there is geopolitical conflict, you can there's quite a clear dividing line between the side that the regimes of the West back and the ones that they don't. Ukraine being a prime example. Like, it's very obvious. Every level of the power structure in Western governments and beyond, in fact, corporations, universities, etc., was always on the side of Ukraine, right? You go into an HR department at a corporation or an NGO, you go into the civil service, you go into a university, you go into the government itself and you ask them about Russia, Ukraine, nobody there is saying they're pro-Russia, right? Whereas, with the Israel-Hamas conflict, it's a bit more muddy. Now, I would say at the topmost levels of the regime, which is to say the government itself, the banks, the foreign policy establishment in America, for example, it's clear that Israel is the side that they back. But if you then go down to the sort of the mid-level of the power structure, which is to say the media, organisations like the BBC, corporate HR departments, universities, there's a lot more conflict there. Yep. And that I find really interesting, because there are people who are sincerely pro-Palestine. I'm not going to say that they're pro-Hamas, because I think that that's a mischaracterization in a lot of cases. But these are people who, you know, I think maybe in a lot of cases rightly look at the suffering that's going on in Palestine of people who are innocent in some cases, children in some cases, and they think, well, there is something wrong happening here. At the same time, if we look at the kinds of thing being done in the name of Palestine by Hamas, it is pretty monstrous. And so this idea that this BBC documentary is somehow Hamas propaganda, I don't necessarily buy that, because I think that that attributes a level of malice and competence to the BBC that I don't think they have. I think that this is simply the case of virtue signalling left-wing middle managers in the BBC, picking people who they think look good on camera and sound good in a kind of HR meeting, where there are concerns about you know, DEI and representation and so on. And they thought, yeah, we'll go with that, you know, that kid, and we'll go with this cameraman because it will look good on our annual report or whatever. That's what I think this is.
And it's shocking journalism.
Well, that too. But this is the BBC, so I'll be surprised.
That's very true. Listen, Charlie, thank you. We hit the clock. Charlie Downs with us on the programme. Thank you to him. Over to you. Anything you've heard there so far? 0344 499 1000. Just gone 1:30. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 25 to 2. This comes in from Andy. If they reset their track record on the NHS, do they also reset the time in service regarding their pensions? This was the trans story that Wes Streeting was alluding to. Good point. Yeah, if everything about your past is gone, would that include your pension? Similar point here from George. For someone's past to be erased if they change gender is patently absurd. In the interest of equality, surely we should all be able to do this. Again, trans activists don't want equality, they want preferential treatment. Utter dodgepots. There is something, thank you for that, George, as well. I mean, it's just bonkers. I don't know what would be on your CV, by the way, on your file. If it was that bad, you'd hope that they're not working in the NHS at all, regardless of gender. Now, Elon Musk has accused Kyiv of being a massive graft machine feeding off the bodies of dead Ukrainian soldiers. This is strong stuff. This is a post on X. The tech billionaire also backed Trump, saying he was right to ignore Zelensky in peace talks with Moscow, claiming Ukrainians despise their leader. It comes as Keir Starmer is being urged to challenge Mr. Trump over Ukraine and trade tariffs during his White House visit next week. Don't hold your breath on that point. Bob Seeley is former Conservative MP and military expert as well. Afternoon to you, Bob. I tell you what, I mean, if nothing else, on sheer I don't know whether to say shock or entertainment value, I'm not sure which. This new American administration doesn't disappoint on that level. It's unconventional stuff. There's no glossy clinical press releases or SPADs writing pre-rehearsed paragraphs for their leader. This is shooting from the hip, and sometimes they'll get it horribly wrong. Maybe sometimes they'll get it right. But what do you make of the general tone of what is coming out of this administration as regards Ukraine so far?
Good afternoon, Ian. Good afternoon to your viewers and listeners. Look, when they were talking about woke and cutting back in government and cutting back in government waste, I'm sure that lots of us were very supportive because we'd like to see more of that happening here. When it comes to Ukraine, I'm sorry, they are just completely wrong. And actually, just to put it bluntly, I think Trump is compromised and Putin thinks he has his man in the White House. You know, we can talk about how he's compromised, if it's psychological, if it's something else. But I'm sorry, I just think Trump is a disaster for the Western alliance. It doesn't mean the Europeans, you know, have done everything right. They clearly haven't. But I think what Trump is saying is absolutely vile. And I think Musk is a fool to parrot him.
Do you sense the underlying issue seems to be here, Bob, and I'm clearly just abridging loosely how I think they are seeing it. Here's a country called Ukraine. America have put Lord knows how many billions of dollars into it, way more as a proportion than the nearest neighbours have to Ukraine. They talk about it more than the nearest neighbours. That's their point, isn't it?
No, that's not actually true. The problem is a lot of what they're saying is untrue. The biggest donor, the biggest individual donor by far is the US. As a proportion of its size, actually Poland, the Baltic republics have given more. The Scandinavians have given healthy amounts. The Danes have pretty much given all their old F-16 stock. So there's a lot of kit. The majority of the kit and aid comes from the European Union. It would be a significant blow if the Americans pulled out. But the idea that the Europeans haven't done everything, the Germans have provided belatedly more aid than us. The French aren't too far behind as well. So if you're looking at proportion, actually the US isn't the biggest backer, and that is simply not true. To say that the money is unaccounted for is simply not true, because every javelin, every bit of significant kit has a barcode. They can trace it. This has actually been something of significance. The CIA and other people have been all over this. I've had long conversations with the Ukrainians to show how all this stuff gets accounted for. There is some slippages, some wastage, probably less than you find in many other parts of the world. So a lot of what Trump is saying, and again, Zelensky popularity, actually higher than Trump's at the moment. And Zelensky has been in power for a lot longer and has endured far more. And again, you know, they're not having elections because the war isn't over yet, and they're not going to have elections until it is. all of them agree to this. So a lot of what Trump's saying is straight up untrue. He's either lying or he doesn't care. And for Musk, as someone I admire, Musk is an impressive businessman in many ways. For him to parrot this is an incredibly stupid thing for him to do, because amongst people who know, it just destroys his credibility.
Okay.
And if we find out that Trump has some really unhealthy relationships with Putin, with the Kremlin, and there's a lot of evidence that he has, it's gonna end badly for Trump and Musk as well.
Nigel Farage said yesterday. Indeed, he said yesterday, Mr. Farage, that you have to take Trump seriously. Don't always take him literally. The spirit of that point, I assume, Bob, is that Trump is trying to say, OK, look, Zelensky is Zelensky. He's not Mahatma Gandhi. Can we just get off the messianic worship? Is that more or less where he's coming from?
Again, sorry, I don't buy this messianic worship. Look, I know Ukraine very well, and we need to support them, but I'm not blind to their faults at all. And in fact, I'm one of the few people who argue that we need to stop seeing Ukraine through these rose-tinted spectacles. As soon as a country gets invaded, we tend to give them martyr status. Look, Ukraine had significant corruption problems. We know it did. We know things aren't perfect in that country, but the war has been a massive spur to clean up the system, to clean up their country, to make it a country worth fighting for. And let's remember that hundreds of thousands of people have been fighting to keep that country free for some time now. So people are willing to die defending this state. So despite its flaws, and so I do think we just need to, whilst recognizing that Ukraine is not a perfect country, but we need to recognize that it has a right to exist, it has a right to defend itself, and we have the right to support it. But I mean, I'm sorry, Zelensky, if I had to choose between Zelensky and Trump, there isn't much of a choice.
That's interesting. Do you think that there's a chess game going on here that you and I are missing, I don't know what to say, the genius of Donald Trump, because it's a kind of a curious, certainly unconventional way of operating. But could it be there's something underneath this, that he's playing a game, he needs to get Putin on side? Up until half an hour ago, this story wasn't even moving. If nothing else, Trump has got it moving.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can get things moving in a productive way, or you can get things moving in an unproductive way. Look, Trump, you talk about Trump's genius. If there is a genius here, it's the fact that he's so unpredictable. Everyone slightly tiptoes around him because they don't know what he's going to do. I think right now, I think what I see him doing is making the Russian media and the Kremlin very, very happy. And if the Kremlin's happy about something, that should be something for us to know.
But could there be a reason for that, Bob? I mean, could there be an underlying purpose?
Because they think they've got that. I tell you why. The Kremlin's very happy, and the Russian media are being gleeful like they have not been for years, is because they think they've got their man in the White House. That's the answer, and that is not a good thing for Western.
But you don't think Mr. Trump is playing just a basic game of look, we can sort out Ukraine. That side can be done. They're the smaller player on the bigger stage. It's Putin we need to sort out. So let's deal with this guy, and then we'll come back to the nuts and bolts of Ukraine.
Yeah, okay, again, Ian, I mean, I wish that was the case, but the reality is that Putin has an agenda to do three things. And he's actually succeeding in all of them. So all these Western experts that says he's a fool, I think they miss actually that he's been quite successful. Firstly, he wants to destroy Ukraine, which he's busy doing at the moment. Secondly, he wants Russia to be virulently anti-Western in its identity. He rejects the pro-Western identity that accompanied the collapse of the Soviet Union. He's turning Russia back to something which is virulently hostile to the West and will be an enemy of the West for decades to come. And thirdly, he wants to break NATO and Western power. And Trump is his vehicle for doing that. That is his agenda. He has specifically stated it is agenda. We know that the GRU and the Russian secret agencies have been all over people close to Trump. And we know that they trashed the Democrat campaign to help Trump get elected. Now, whether they got Trump over the line, we will never know. But these are pretty incontrovertible facts because they've said so, or the US Senate intelligence agencies have confirmed all this.
But what's in it for Trump?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, this is the question. I don't know. I mean, he said he wants to bring the war to an end, which is a noble aim. But anyone can bring the war to an end if you're forcing somebody to surrender. We could have ended World War II much earlier by capitulating to Hitler. We decided not to. We paid a high price in that, but it was better for the world. If you're getting somebody to capitulate, it's very easy to end a war. But it's not necessarily a good thing if it's your ally. And if you get a government that is pro-Russian in Kiev, you'll get years of instability, you'll get permanent uprisings aimed at that government, and effectively you'll have either a hard or a hot or cold civil war in that country for years to come. The Russians will then re-invade. Let me just finish.
Go on, Bob, sorry.
They slaughtered people wherever they have come into contact with Ukrainians. They have killed them, shot them in cold blood in large numbers. So this isn't 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. This isn't some confusing situation. Putin invaded. Putin is killing Ukrainians. Ukrainians are defending themselves because they know if they don't, even more of them will die and be killed by the Russians.
Final question, Bob. Where do you see this story in a year's time? Peace in Ukraine? The world looking like a better place?
Either we're going to get to some sort of dirty peace and stalemate, in which case the Russians will turn to try to collapse Ukrainians in non-military means, assassination, bribery, corruption, organised crime, the sort of tools that they're beginning to use in Western Europe, in sabotage operations, in information operations, in political warfare. They haven't given up. Putin hasn't given up attacking the West. He will not stop until he breaks the power of NATO, and that's what he wants to do. So I hope we're wise. I hope we get a ceasefire, but I hope we don't betray ourselves and our values, because the long-term situation for our countries will be much darker if we do.
Let me just bring you this comment from Robert in Nottingham, who got in touch, Bob, based on what you've been saying. He says, Bob Seeley is another warmonger. When will these people understand we want peace? Our forces should not be getting involved in conflicts which are not our business. Other than humanitarian aid, I object to my taxes being used to prosecute a proxy war. Thoughts on that, Bob Seeley?
I think Rob is very ill-informed, and I don't particularly like being called a warmonger. I think countries have a right to defend themselves, and that's not warmongering, that's supporting peace, but peace through strength. And people say that other people are warmongers, probably are talking out something, an orifice that isn't their mouth.
There it is. Bob, thank you for that. Bob Seeley, a strong condemnation to Robert's comment on... Robert's thinking I only sent a text in because I thought it was an interesting contribution. Talking out your what's it, Robert, according to Bob Seeley. Not me, by the way. I was just simply relaying your message to our guest. That's Bob Seeley. He's a former Conservative MP, military expert. He is a man who's on the right of the party, and this is what's interesting about Trump. He's not some, lily-livered lefty Tory kind of character, but his assessment is that Trump's got this wrong. Zelensky is a far more trustworthy character than Trump, and it's not about war. It's about protecting a European nation that has been invaded. Thoughts on all of that? 0344 499 1000. And thank you to Robert, by the way, for your contribution, your text that you sent in. I was happy to pass it on. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
A lawyer must not deceive anybody, least of all prospective clients. And I think the position of Mr. Reynolds has become unsustainable.
So you think he should resign because of this?
Absolutely. he must realise that what he did was not just an error, but really, really wrong and misleading. And if he doesn't want to resign, the leader, our Prime Minister, should make him resign.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This referenced the BBC documentary on... It wasn't a documentary, really. It's just a kind of propaganda platform. Sarah in West Sussex says, BBC documentary on Gaza, please read X and David Collier. Well, yes, that we have. That's the whole reason for the story. And I just referenced him at the beginning as well. A thorough investigation has been conducted. The BBC broadcast was pure Hamas propaganda. For those pro-Palestinian supporters suggest they read the Henry Jackson Society and how Hamas diverts aid funding to fund its cause. Absolutely spot on, Sarah. Thank you very much indeed for that. Georgina is down in London on Trump. What have you got, Georgina? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you. Fabulous show. Well,
Thank
I've got to say, before I start, because I'm going to have a bit of a vent now,
Go on.
I don't agree with Bob Seeley on any of the points that he expressed about Trump or Elon Musk. And I do think that what a conservative or former conservative's views are should be taken with a very large pinch of salt. I, for one, haven't forgotten the Partygate scandals and all the lies told there. What I wanted to say, if I may, is Donald Trump has never been a mouthpiece for Russia, and he is the last person to show any kind of weakness to Putin during these peace talks. In fact, I can imagine that when Putin went into the White House, he was read the Riot Act. To say that he is, you know, a mouthpiece for Russia is an absolute nonsense. I do, however, feel that we need to take a step back and take a longer look at Zelensky, as he doesn't seem to me to be in any rush to join the peace negotiations at this time, and that makes me feel very uneasy.
Do you think... I was talking to somebody yesterday who's a Republican in America, voted for Trump, etc., and he was saying that his old grandfather, who was the kind of guy that sits in a rocking chair on the veranda in Wyoming saying things like, looks like there's a storm brewing up over the west, one of those old Americans who would have been absolutely shocked to see his president almost siding with Russia on something.
It's not a case of siding with Russia. I mean, we have said before that President Trump is not a conventional president. He does things his way and he gets results, you know, but he's renowned for getting good results. Zelensky, as we know, is not top of the pops with Trump after the stupid tweets he posted saying Trump lives in a world of disinformation. Donald Trump's lived with disinformation about his party for goodness knows how long, so he knows what disinformation is, and he's not going to take party to that. But what you've got to realise, on top of that, is the very small matter of $175 billion going astray. I don't care what Bob Seeley said. This money has gone missing. If that was Keir Starmer and we'd have sent that money over, I think he would be jumping up and down.
Well, he says that's not true, didn't he? Well, he didn't specifically pick up on that one story, but he said that, you know, everything is accounted for.
Well, I think that is a blatant untruth. I've got to be honest. That's about as believable as all staying at home during COVID, but that's another matter. Right, Trump's interested in one thing, Ian, and I'll tell you what that is. Stop the slaughter of the soldiers and civilians on both sides. Whether the tactics are conventional or not, it's irrelevant as long as he gets the job done, and I'm sure he will. And the comments that about Elon Musk, you know, please remember that this brilliant, might I say, young man, has got autistic tendencies, and his verbal filter is not censored. He speaks with passion and from his heart.
Yeah. There it is. We have Rain Man as his right-hand man. Thank you. Don't say that as a pejorative. Georgina, thank you for that. It's an interesting counter to everything that Bob Seeley said. Georgina, not a fan of Bob Seeley, but totally understands what Mr. Trump is doing. Let's come closer to home on the European mobility scheme that's being discussed. Victor in Bedfordshire, you're buying into this thing, Victor? Good afternoon to you.
Well, somehow I don't think it'll work.
Okay.
I don't think it'll. I mean, they're supposed to. The idea is you come here for a limited time, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 years with a possibility of a 1-year extension is the.
Yeah, but see, this government is not very good at making sure that the people do that. They go back, or what tends to happen, people just disappear.
But would the average, fairly affluent French student want to disappear into the grey economy and start doing Deliveroos?
I think it'd be more likely they'll be coming from Portugal, Spain, where there's lots of unemployment. Well, a fair amount of unemployment.
So areas that are, suffering and have done for a long time difficulties might be disproportionately represented in those applying. Okay.
It does look to me like another sign that Keir Starmer wants to take us back in properly into the Europe.
But, I mean, he couldn't do that, could he, though, Vic? I mean, it would be... the rigmarole, to use that word, doesn't get used often enough, in doing that, the financial implications would be so big that you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it quietly, really.
It might not. It might not. It could take time, but I think
that's where his heart is. You're absolutely right. That's absolutely where his heart is. You're spot on, Victor. Thank you very much indeed for that. Stuart says, I agree with your call-up. There are too many people banging on about war instead of looking for a ceasefire and a resolution to the problem. I'm with President Trump 100%. David Lloyd, maybe Trump has just learned the true scale of casualties. Ukraine might only have months left before complete military collapse. Get a deal quick before Russia wins the lot. And of course, the theory, or the kind of, I'm assuming, I want to speak for Bob Seeley, I think his line would be, well, if you cave in an inch to a dictator. I mean, let's just remember who Putin is, by the way, in all of this story. He's not a good bloke, all right? It's really not a nice man. Try and be an outspoken voice against Russia, whether you're a citizen, a journalist, a former business partner of Putin, or someone who's trying to set up a rival oil company. You'll know what a gulag looks like in about half an hour. So let's not pretend this is a man with great honourable intentions. He's looking to expand his empire. He would rather have been the leader of the USSR back in the day. He's not. It's Russia. It's a smaller deal. It's militarily significant. Economically, it isn't quite hitting the same numbers as other big military states. And he wants to carve out his mark and expand his own country on the national stage, so on the international stage. So where does he, if he is appeased, if that is the question, by the way, if he is appeased, where does Putin go next? It is a chess game, and I'd like to think Trump is playing a very Kasparov-style game himself here. Maybe only time will tell. We'll know where we are in a year. 0344 499 1000. Will America create a more peaceful world? There's one question. And this reciprocal arrangement with the EU to allow under-30s freedom of movement. We would be able to go over there, or our under-30s would, and EU citizens under 30 could come over here. More comment on the way. Chloe Dobbs with us on the other side of the news at 2, which is next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Coming up on 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. We've got a lot to wade through this afternoon, including Britain set to offer the EU an Australian-style youth mobility scheme as part of Keir Starmer's plans for a post-Brexit reset. Could it curiously solve one of our many problems on immigration? Could it do that? We'll look more at that story in a few moments. Also this afternoon, Elon Musk has accused Kyiv of being a graft machine, feeding off Ukrainian soldiers' deaths, backing Donald Trump's decision to ignore Zelensky in peace talks. I mean, it is a bit odd, isn't it, that the main country that's been invaded would be excluded from peace talks, if that turned out to be the case. And Health Secretary Wes Streeting is demanding immediate change after an investigation found that medics who change gender, you can't really, but you take the point, are able to wipe their records of previous suspensions and formal warnings. I mean, this is grade A bonkers. Helen Joyce joins us a little later to dissect this one. What a voice to have on this story. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news, 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. Peter says, Ian, you're starting to sound like James O'Brien, utterly blinkered, one-sided, opinionated and a tool of the propaganda state. Do basic journalism. If you want to know about Ukraine, ask me. I've been on top of it from the very beginning. I haven't actually given my view at all since the beginning, Peter. You have projected your opinions onto me, which is a classic blunder, and I'm happy to rectify that for you, but it does happen. I have no idea what is the answer here. I muse, if that's the right word, that Donald Trump is playing a genius chess game, which was my suggestion. Maybe that's the bit that Peter is not happy with. Maybe Peter is more pro-Ukraine and Zelensky. I'm assuming he is from what he said. I don't know, because nobody knows. Even those up close and personal to Donald Trump don't really know what his next move is. So in perhaps a moment of generosity, I'm kind of wondering whether there's more to it than this. Bob Seeley, very much the Bob Seeley, I assume, is Team Peter, who's just contacted me to say that this is an outrage, what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are saying, and we should all be behind Zelensky and not Trump. And Putin is the most dangerous man on planet Earth, and therefore, you know, we must... I think we can wear more than one hat on this. I think we can all acknowledge Putin's shortcomings and aggressions and horrific history in simply culling dissenters and God knows who else. But I don't think you could reasonably, Peter, put any of that on the left-wing thinking, if that is what you're saying, because I can't imagine Mr. OB that you just mentioned coming out in any way saying that about Trump. But look, I've done this job long enough to know that people will hear things in different ways. So, yes, it's a bit bizarre and peculiar, but I'm all ears at this end, fella. 0344 499 1000. Chloe Dobbs is with us, political commentator, and all-round good egg. Afternoon to you, Chloe.
Good afternoon, Ian.
I caught a bit of the Channel 4 show the other day.
Oh, fantastic.
The one that you are on, and remind me what it's called. It's called...
Go Back to Where You Came From.
Go Back to Where You Came From. Obvious reason why they named it that. Different political characters with different political views thrown into a situation that may or may not change your mind on issues such as primarily immigration, right?
Yeah, it's a very action-packed show, and they've done it in a very interesting, entertaining way. It's not some bog-standard, boring documentary, so it's fun and informative at the same time. It's a good show.
Yeah. How long did it take to do? How long were you away for?
It was a whole month.
Yeah.
So
was it hard? Was it difficult? Was it graft? Was it? I know it was. There was a bit that was really scary when you lobbed out on a boat, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that was the scariest part for me because we genuinely thought that we were going to die out there. They say before the scene these people don't know that this is a simulation, and we didn't know, and it was absolutely terrifying. But the engine braking, which you see in the scene, that was not part of the simulation. That wasn't planned.
So it genuinely broke at that point?
That was not intentional. It actually broke, and we were bobbing about on the sea for ages trying to fix it. And we were told by the smuggler, who was a real smuggler that we interviewed, that there would be a spare engine on the boat and all this spare petrol and food and everything. You get on it and there are like two 2-litre bottles of water, no spare engine, no petrol, anything. And I'm thinking, our chances of survival are pretty low here.
And you think you're about to embark on a journey of how long?
We were told potentially up to 7 days. It's a really long journey all the way from Lebanon to Italy. It's crazy, and so many people die. We talk about the number of people that die in the Channel, but it's tiny compared to the number of people. Honestly, that sea, the Mediterranean Sea, it is a cemetery. It is full of dead bodies.
So at that point, you really thought, God, this could be it.
Yeah, we were saying our last words.
Did it? I mean, obviously, is there one more episode to come?
There's one more. They have released the whole thing online, but the final episode comes out on the telly on Monday night.
Did it fundamentally change your view on anything about immigration? Because I thought you were pretty good at kind of understand. You know, you like this the whole business. You can wear more than one hat. I thought you were great at going, yeah, this is terrible, but it doesn't fundamentally change the fact that I still think this, and this.
My views definitely changed to some respect. The annoying thing with a TV show that's got to be edited down as tight as possible is you don't get all the nuance of my argument in there. I think a lot of us came away thinking that we wish that the West, after they helped get rid of ISIS in Syria, that they had helped them start to rebuild and get on their feet a little bit, because a lot of people are just fleeing poverty because their houses there, I mean, there's still just it's just a load of rubble. It's just crumbles because they don't have any money to kind of get things going again. So that was one thing I came away with. And another thing I came away with is the French are taking us for absolute fools. We should not be giving them a dime of our money, because they're basically pushing people onto the boats and onto the lorries. We spoke to a bunch of people who said to us, I want to claim asylum here in France, but I can't, because the French have told us, they've given us a letter saying you've got 7 days to leave the country, please get out. I don't understand how that's allowed. I thought that you have a right to try and claim asylum and see if it gets rejected first or not. But apparently not. A load of them
not
said
in
to
France.
us, we're getting these letters and not even giving them a flight or a train somewhere. We got so much stick because of offering people a flight to Rwanda, but they were offering nothing. They basically said you have to find an illegal way out the country. Yet we've given them nearly £500 million.
I know,
What's going on?
It's crazy. And the other thing I thought it showed up, because there's two different teams on the programme, aren't there, that are out doing different bits. And the trucker guy from Burnley, who...
Nathan.
If you ever want a lesson in how to swear, I mean, this guy will give it to you. I mean, he pulled no punches. But there was a moment in there where he was interviewing some people you would have seen this, obviously, in the line who were, trying to get on a boat, I think aiming ultimately for France or the UK. And he said, I think he was from Syria, and he said, you can't really get a job in Syria, and prospects aren't looking very good, and wants to come to the UK to try and find work. And I thought, OK, that's fine. But that is not a reason to get asylum in another country. The fact you can't find a job, I don't think even the United Nations push it that far, which kind of rather compounded what I've always thought is that, people coming over on boats, I don't think for one second most of them are rapists. I don't think for one second that most of them, want to
Most of them are lovely people that just want a better life.
Yeah, exactly. Which, again, I don't blame those individuals for giving it a go. If I came from some of the places they came from, I'd be giving it a go. And I'd hope I could bring my family along later as well.
So you can understand why they're doing
it.
One thing I came away with is I'm far less angry at the migrants themselves. I blame the system more.
Yeah. And it's the system, of course, because, the fact you can't find a job or you don't like your president is not a reason to claim asylum. It might feel like that.
That Syrian there that Nathan was talking to, he was talking there about wanting to go to Switzerland and saying...
That was in Switzerland,
he was saying, I want to become a nurse. And I thought, that's fantastic, ambitious guy. But realistically... you know, you're going to have to be trained up for years to become a nurse. I mean, he was only just about speaking broken English. These people, I mean, most of the people that we spoke to that were coming to Britain did not really speak any English at all. I was kind of thinking, are these really going to be valuable members of our workforce who are going to quickly learn how to speak English fluently and learn a really valuable skill that we need in our economy? I think I'm doubtful. A lot of them had great dreams and were lovely people.
And Nathan, the swearing man from Burnley, had a bit of a bromance with Mohammed, didn't he? Because he said, "Oh God, I thought you were coming here just to sponge everything." And he said, "You're a really nice bloke. I wish you luck, mate." Shook his hand.
Yeah, and it was really hard when you see a very short little snippet on camera, but for example, the family that there is a scene with of my team in Syria, we spent an entire day filming with that family, and you get so close to them and so emotionally attached, it's so hard to then walk away and say, sorry, we can't take you guys with us.
Yeah.
We're going to go back to our cosy hotel and we'll leave you here.
Well, let's move to some of the press. Yeah, indeed. I'm sure we'll talk about this again at some point, Chloe, because it's a fascinating kind of, I don't want to say experiment, but, you know, documentary and the way it's put together, etc. Talking of sort of immigration or temporary migration, Britain to offer EU youth a mobility scheme in Brexit reset talks. This is something we do already with Australia and other countries as well. If you're between, I think, 18 and 30, you can travel across the continent, and people can come here of the same age. So it's not a full-time thing. You can't claim any benefits if you come here. You can't, I don't even think your NHS is completely free either. I think there's a premium to pay there as well. Is it a good idea or a bad idea?
I think it's probably a bad idea, but it depends how this is funded and structured. So when we had the Erasmus scheme, which this seems to be another version of that, basically, where students are able to move between Europe. I mean, it was great for students who were studying languages, but we were putting a load of money in the coffers to pay for the scheme, yet the vast majority of people taking advantage of this scheme were people coming to study in Britain as opposed to the other way round. So it was quite costly to us, and Europe was really getting all the benefit. And the reason for that is we've got the best universities in the world in Britain. I know a lot of people in Britain these days talk ourselves down, but people love this country and people want to come here, especially for our education. We've got Oxbridge and other great universities here. So if it's going to be a similar setup like that again, I don't see how it's going to benefit us. And given the EU are the ones who are really pushing for this, I expect they're going to be trying to set it up into a way where they are the net benefiters of it. If it's set up so that how it's funded is just on a, say, student by student basis, so Britain has sent X number of students to Europe, so you pay this amount times the number of students and the other way around, so it ends up fair, then maybe. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Also this story, we're getting one of these stories a day at the moment. A convicted Sri Lankan sex offender has been allowed to stay in the UK due to being gay. He was jailed in 2012 for abusing 3 teenage boys and fought deportation for 12 years. And the Court of Appeal ruled there was insufficient analysis of his potential persecution in Sri Lanka as a gay man. Back in 2017, the Home Office tried to deport him, citing changes to the asylum guidance on gay rights in Syria. A new deportation hearing will be held with more considerations. I mean, this is a sex offender, clearly has no place in our country, and, the latest in a long line of extraordinary excuses to keep somebody here who've done very bad things.
This is just getting out of hand. I mean, as you say, there seems to be one of these stories every day, or often more than once a day, and well done to the journalists that are putting in the work to uncover all these ridiculous cases. We are realising that these weird cases, it's not something that happens in a blue moon as a fluke. This stuff happens all the time. And so there's a lot of talk going around about, oh, do we need to leave the ECHR? And yes, eventually maybe we probably do need to leave the ECHR, but in the short run, why don't we just start ignoring the ECHR? Because other countries do. I had a look the other day, Ian, and there are nearly 10,000 ECHR judgments that have been ignored because other countries just ignore them when they say bonkers stuff like in this case. So, I mean, for example, France, there was an extremist, an Islamist who they wanted to deport back to Uzbekistan, but the ECHR said, no, it's not safe to send him back here. So they just ignored the ECHR and said, nope, this guy's a threat. Off he goes. Why aren't we doing that in Britain? We just don't have the backbone to stand up to these people. I mean,
indeed, and people are... Go on, carry on, Chloe.
Remember when we had that plane on the tarmac ready to take off to go to Rwanda, and then the ECHR said no, so we just halted it and stopped it. We probably could have just ignored them. I mean, I'm not a legal expert, but
no, well, yeah. I think you're right, and you just touched on it at the beginning when we were talking about how France deals with some of the people at their end who are, wanted to claim us. So you don't even get to the point of claiming, which I thought breached the rule of the EU and all that goes with it, but apparently not. And we are in this peculiar place, and people scratching their head, mostly on the left, who are going, how did this Donald Trump character get into power again? How did that happen? Well, because of stuff like this, because this is the very sort of area that he would go, sorry, if that's what you've done, you're out of here.
Yeah, I mean, we're just allowing the rest of the world to take advantage of us and take us for fools. I mean, we just look like an absolute laughingstock. There was another story out the other day which shocked me when it was a Syrian found guilty of, I think, of sexual assault or rape, who... they wanted to put him in prison. We weren't even talking about deporting him at this point. We were just saying take him off the British streets and put him in jail so that he's not harming anybody. But apparently, because of Article 3 ECHR again, we can't put him in jail because he's got PTSD from when he was in jail under the Syrian regime in Syria.
That's right,
and I'm like,
yes.
Hang
He's
on.
going to be freaked out by the jail or something.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, maybe he does have trauma, but this guy is a threat to young women
Unbelievable.
in this country. He shouldn't be on the streets. We can't be putting women and girls at threat like this. It's just wrong.
And just finally, a quick word on this, if you can, Chloe. Angela Rayner's CV is now under scrutiny. How many more cabinet ministers can we have whose CV is at best a little bit iffy and at worst total balderdash? And we've had Jonathan Reynolds yesterday with his I'm a solicitor. Well, I never actually said that. No, you did. You literally did. Rachel Reeves, of course, we've been over that a number of times. There are others. Angela Rayner, who's talked for a long time about being a carer. I worked as a carer for all these years. Depending on which interview you listen to or which entry you listen to, she was a carer either for 7 years or about 15 years. And she said this so many times, it's hard to keep up. You wouldn't think it would be that hard to remember how long you did a job for.
This is bad. I think of the three of them, Rachel Reeves, Angela Rayner and Jonathan Reynolds, I thought the Jonathan Reynolds one was the worst of them all because
Agreed.
he said not just on his LinkedIn CV but on his personal website, in a contribution in Parliament, in several newspapers, that he was a solicitor. So that was just absolutely not on. That cannot just be called a slip up. The three of them all together, it's just painting a picture that this is a government that cannot be trusted. They told us politics was going to be different, that they were going to be accountable, they were going to be trustworthy, but it's become clear very quickly that that's not the case. And the polls show it. Reform are surging ahead. Their approval ratings are just plummeting very quickly.
Indeed. And, there's a big old gap between 7 years and 17 years. But that is that's the area that Angela Rayner can't quite work out how long she did it for. Either around about half a decade or nearly 2 decades. It's quite a wide distinction between those numbers. Listen, Chloe, thank you as ever. We're going to speak again very soon. She is Chloe Dobbs, of course, voice of reason, and with us on the programme, 0344 499 1000. Anything you heard there you want to throw into the mix, that's great. More comments on the way. Right now, it's 2:20.
Musk has jumped on the bandwagon now and claims Zelensky runs a fraud machine feeding off the dead bodies of soldiers and is despised by the Ukrainian people. Is he?
No, not at all. His approval ratings still sit comfortably above 50%. We're in a very strange place, where we have the White House nakedly parroting Kremlin disinformation lines. It's a genuinely scary and terrifying time. This could go so horribly wrong, ending in a greater conflagration than we're even seeing now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There we go, you can hear me now. That was a case of not plugging in your microphone. Second time in 2 weeks. I think it's kicking in, don't you? I've also been called a Trump-supporting warmonger by somebody on my own social media, which I thought was interesting because we couldn't quite work out what a previous texter suggested that I was somehow sort of akin to a left-wing voice while simultaneously kind of supporting or tenuously supporting the Trump position, understanding the Trump position, I think is the better thing. I do not know. I'm not a master of international relations. I can't fathom what's going on. I've never particularly rated Zelensky. I didn't sort of buy into that. He's Mahatma Gandhi kind of character. The combats and the jumper were always, to me, a little bit of a giveaway. We know the place has been riddled in corruption for years. Of course, there's a lot of big question marks over Ukraine. And I understand America's position of going, hang on a second, you know, we are putting too much money into this and no one's trying to solve it. I totally get that, but I couldn't purport to fully understand the grander geopolitical picture that's at play at the moment, and I don't think those around Donald Trump would do so either. Yeah, I want to solve it. I'm talking to Putin. I will be at some point. That's going to be in the coming weeks, I'm sure. We're going to see the handshake and all that goes with it. Rob is over here in Cheshire. What are you making of this, Rob? Good afternoon to you.
Hi, you're in. Good.
Yeah.
I have a theory. I do think it is a chess game. I don't think he's a Putin apologist or anything like that. But my theory is that when he tried to warn Germany a few years back about energy independence, I think it was at the UN, and there's videos, they were laughing in his face at the time. They just were not taking him seriously.
Yeah.
And so these recent tweets, I wonder whether this time he's trying to shock Europe, thinking, well, last time you didn't listen, you actually laughed. So how about I scare you into thinking you're going to be on your own, so you'll have to do something?
I think that's true. And also at the backdrop of all of that, and I know this is sort of largely unrelated, but in many respects it does dovetail with this story. The whole kind of strange, curious, neo-left-wing European agenda that has been at play over things like free speech. I don't want to use the word wokery, but it's all of that. As I think, you know, J.D. Vance and Trump are looking at this thing, and, you know, these guys are barking mad over there in the EU. And some of that kind of bizarre way of doing business does filter through to more important issues, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly that. And it's not just that. Even people like me, who are normally very patriotic, I look around and think, why? It's my politicians that are hurting me.
100%.
You know, I hate to go. I don't want to go too far, but Putin's never done anything to me. It's my politicians.
We've got a leader who says you shouldn't say only women have a cervix. You know, we literally that's literally our prime minister.
Exactly. So in terms of troops on the ground, not that it affects me, but, you know, if you'd asked me to go to war 10 years ago, maybe, but today I would say, for what? For a country that is constantly punishing me and hates me. So why?
There is. Yeah, I think you're spot on. Good call. Rob, thank you for that. Good man. One here, no name given. I'm a serving military man for the last 18 years and still going. Well, thank you for that. If you want peace, you have to prepare for war. Unfortunately, that is the way of the world. I sense you're right as well. One in from John, who says, there is no place called Palestine, there is Gaza, and there are arguably Palestinians. There is no state called Palestine. Hamas forcibly won the election to rule Gaza and nowhere else. Always worth making that point again. And this in from Paul, who says, I know we have a mass immigration, social and economic crisis in the UK. Let's make it even worse, dig a hole even deeper. Let's really commit national suicide. Let even more people into the country and allow more European migrants into the UK. This is reference that scheme. I may have read that right at the beginning, actually. Britain is to offer European countries an Australian-style youth mobility scheme. This is part of Keir Starmer's great reset when it comes to our relationship with Brussels and the EU. Under the plans tabled by British negotiators, this is what we're hearing, tens of thousands of young EU workers and students will be able to come to the UK and live and work for 2 years with the possibility of a 1-year extension. It's a reciprocal scheme, so it would allow young Brits aged between 18 and 30 similar access to countries in the European Union. However, the number of young people allowed into the UK would be capped annually to allay Home Office concerns over its impact on immigration statistics. Those coming to the UK would have to pay an NHS surcharge and would not be entitled to benefits. Does that in any respect allay your fears that this might be, you know, getting back into the EU by the back door? I don't think the kind of people we're talking about here, I know we had an earlier caller who was a little suspicious over who those people would be. I think these are your average. I mean, it happens with Australia. We've got a scheme exactly like this with Australia. That's Adam, our producer, initially came to this country on such a scheme. He actually posted himself here in a box, which is a rather interesting way to get here, but he's not the first, won't be the last. So yes, it exists already with other countries. Would the EU be the obvious group of people that this should work with? And would it, if these people came and did, if you like, non-skilled jobs, you know, I'm talking about working in coffee bars and stuff like that, would it be the answer to some of our immigration problems? Who would you rather have doing those jobs? Would you rather have people from 1,000 different countries around the world whose nationality and cultural connections are very different to the UK? Or would you rather have, you know, some Germans and some French and some Spaniards doing those jobs? That's, I think, the way some people are kind of looking at it. And I sort of get that. And if you're 18 and you want to go backpacking, it's quite nice to have it the easiest route possible, right? But you've got to be able to support yourself in doing so. I never thought that was under any question that you'd have to support yourself. One here that comes in from Don in Chelmsford. We have defeated lots of European countries in wars over the years. When we left the EU, they tried to punish us. They tried to stop our COVID jabs. The French threatened to pull the plug on Jersey electricity supplies. Remember that? They are not our friends, says Don. Yeah, I fear you might be right, Don. 0344 499 1000. And we're talking about Donald Trump and the wider question on Trump. Oh, by the way, on the EU thing, the reciprocal scheme, what are the red flags of that scheme, basically? What are the areas you think, hang on a second, this could be something much more sinister when it comes to our political relationship with the EU? We'll take more comment on that. As for Trump, what is he playing at? Even half his closest allies haven't got a clue what he's playing at, but he's certainly playing a game that's put this story of Ukraine on the front pages every day for the last couple of weeks, and it ain't going away anytime soon. And I would add into that no one previously had been able to do it. I don't know what Sleepy Joe was doing in the White House for all of those years. He certainly wasn't solving this. He was throwing a load of money into Ukraine. That kept on going. And, you know, we're behind you, boys. And it was all of that. But solving it? No. So we have got a scintilla of something here. Is it hope? Does it make it more dangerous? Is Putin simply being placated on a temporary basis by Trump? But, you know, I would have thought Vlad would see through that, wouldn't he? Wouldn't he go, this is some New Yorker coming round here telling us that, yeah, it's fine, Vlad, everything's good, don't worry. We've got your back. Really? Would he believe that? So who's playing what game is quite hard to tell. If the result is peace, I ain't that bothered if Elon Musk starts mouthing off like a student nut job. Fine, walking around the stage with a chainsaw in his hand. See Twitter for details. I don't care about that if he gets it solved. I think that's a reasonable position. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Robert in Nottingham says, Robert earlier sent us a message suggesting that Bob Seeley, the former Tory MP and military expert, was a warmonger because of his support for Zelensky. And Robert made that point. I relayed that point to Bob, and Bob suggested that politely, or not so politely, that Robert was talking out of his what's-its, or what's it. Robert says, my text was to provide a little balance. I thought it was fine, by the way, it was balanced. No hard feelings, but was it Thatcher who said, when they insult you, you know they've lost? Great show, yes. What's the other one that they used to say over there in the States? When they go low, we go high, or something? It was in that ballpark. Robert, thank you again. 0344 499 1000. I was about to say, here's a curious story, but it's not that curious. It's quite predictable in the rather bizarre upside-down world we've ended up in. Doctors who change gender, spoiler alert, you can't actually do that, but I know what they're saying. Doctors who change gender are reportedly being given new registration numbers as a doctor, not for their car, erasing their disciplinary history from the public register. So if they've been given a written warning for something, or they had a row with a colleague and it wasn't very good and they got reported, if you change gender, that would be eradicated. This means future patients cannot access information linked to their previous identity. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has condemned the practice and demanded immediate changes. Let's speak with Helen Joyce, Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, author of Transgender Identity and the New Battle for Women's Rights. Always nice to have you on, Helen. I think I start, every time we chat, I think I start with the same line. When I first read this story, I had to read it again because I thought, what, really? You can eradicate your history because you decided to go from being Mike to Michelle?
I know, welcome to my world. Every day I think I've seen the last bit of insanity, and every day there's a new bit of insanity. It appears there is no bottom to the insanity. Yes. Yes, this story is correct, that you don't need any paperwork. You literally, if you are a doctor, you just need to say to the GMC, I have changed my gender, and they will give you a new number. Now, people do change their names all the time, especially when they get married. But your number, your doctor's registration number, is meant to come with you. Yes. And if something has happened and you have been suspended for 3 months or more, but you're now back practicing, that'll be visible on your public-facing register for, I think it's 15 years. But not if you've done this process of telling them that you've changed gender. They will just sort of abandon one record and create a new one. So rather rapidly, you can see this isn't actually about trans particularly. It's really about a loophole. And we know what sort of person uses loopholes. Bad people.
Well, right. I mean, I can't understand why they would even suggest you get a new number. Is there any reason for that? I mean, like you say, if you get married, you don't get a new number. You just keep you change your name. You might change your address, but you don't change your registration number.
Well, because they want to change the M and F, don't they? So they want to pretend there never was a male doctor called Mike, that this doctor always was female Michelle. So Mike has to kind of die. It's the same sort of rationale that gets us calling it dead naming, to call a trans person by their previous name. I mean, it just shows you what happens when you start with a falsehood. I mean, it's not possible, as you said in the introduction, to change your sex. But if you pretend that you can, you find yourself willy-nilly brought along a path to doing things that are absolutely absurd and that you would never have done if that's where you had started out. If somebody had said to the GMC, are you willing to do this? They would have said no, but now they're doing it.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Because if you have been, I mean, this idea, this suggestion, this ruling is completely consistent with somebody who believes you can do that. And because of that, once they bought into the lie, then naturally what follows are things like this. That, as far as they're concerned, they're doing what's logical.
Exactly. And, you know, patients do have the right to say that they are only willing to be examined by somebody of the same sex as them, both men and women, but it's more important for women for obvious reasons. Yeah. Now, the GMC says that that's something that can be managed at the individual practice level, but that's not correct. That's where it's hurtful and offensive and difficult. Like, it's not for a woman to walk into the examining room and look at the doctor that she thought was a woman from the name and the F on the registration and say, excuse me, are you a man? And she knows she's going to get called transphobic. It might be hugely embarrassing for her. It's for the GMC to show leadership on this and to just simply say, it's not possible to change sex. You do you in your personal life, that's fine. But when it comes to the consulting room, it's the patient's needs and interests that come first.
Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has condemned this practice. He's demanded immediate changes. I don't know whether that just falls on deaf ears, because I can only imagine that the various medical councils involved in this would just simply say, well, I'm sorry, we don't have to listen to the Health Secretary on this. It's not a job for the Health Secretary, although I'd like to think it is.
I mean, I think they actually do have operational independence, but I think it's pretty brave to just ignore the Health Secretary when he points out something that 90% plus of people in the country must agree on this.
Where do we go with all of these stories, Helen, on the kind of wider issue? There is maybe a misplaced sense, and maybe this is because of what's happening in other countries around the world, that, you know, the tide is turning, common sense is returning to the public conversation, and all this absolute nonsense of, you know, a big bloke with a penis and a beard who just decides one day, I'm a woman, you know, all get in the bin, mate. You're not. You know you're not as well. That's the worst part about it. I don't dispute some people who genuinely psychologically have an issue where they believe that is their correct gender. I don't dispute that. I don't have to recognise things that aren't facts, of course. But so we can all wear more than one hat. But are things changing, is my point, Helen?
Yeah, but the trouble is that this has been going on, especially behind the scenes and in institutions, for so long, at least 20 years, that it's become really embedded. I mean, we've just seen an employment tribunal with a nurse, Sandy Peggy, in Fife in Scotland, and I watched a lot of it remotely. And the doctor in question, who is a man who says he's a woman, he was going into the women's changing rooms and changing in there, and Sandy objected to that. Now, she was the one who was suspended. Yeah. But that doctor insisted under oath that he was female, not just that he was a woman or a trans woman, that he was female, that he was biologically female. So this has been, this has been allowed. That's an A&E doctor saying this. You'd think he'd know better. But if it's been allowed for so long, a lot of people have built their identities on it. They think they're entitled. They've built their workplace practices, and it is going to be the devil of a job to try to get it back to sanity.
Yeah, indeed. Sadly, we will speak again, Helen. I mean that kindly, of course. Helen Joyce with us on the programme. Helen is Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, author too. Thank you to her. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Stephen makes an interesting point on the European reciprocal scheme for 18 to 30s. About 1.1 million people aged 16 to 49 are unemployed. Why are they not taking the jobs in Costa, Deliveroo, etc.? Why open the doors to European 16 to 30-year-olds in this situation? I can only think of two reasons there, Steve. I mean, firstly, the people that are coming over from other countries may not want to work at all, and they don't have to, of course, under this scheme. It's not about working. They won't get any benefits, but they look after themselves like a backpacker would. So they wouldn't. However, if they wanted to work, you might argue that some of those guys are more willing to than, for whatever reason, those jobs that we can't fill in this country. And there are, well, you say 1.1 million in that age group, and many more who are in other different categories of being out of the workplace for a variety of reasons. Let's go to Steve, who's over here in Scunthorpe. How are you doing, Steve?
Hi, not too bad.
Good.
Just for us, what I'm calling about, they're talking about Trump and all the horrible things he says about people and that, how disgusting it is. I would never say that, but didn't Davey call Farage a boot-licking Trump supporter or something? Why does it work both ways?
Yeah, that's very good point. Well, if you're Nigel Farage, apparently you can say anything about him, and nobody, that's apparently okay.
Yeah, Tory scum, Yeah,
that was Angela Rayner, of course.
Free pass, Anyway, what I was going to say was these people, Mandy or whatever her name is, now supposedly a doctor.
Yes.
Don't they have a certificate up with their name on it? And
yeah.
When they were become a doctor, the certificate to say they're a doctor.
Yep.
So if that changed, and if that's changed, then to me they're not a doctor.
Well, they changed they changed the certificate, right? They change it from being male to female, or the other way around.
Yeah, but how can you do that? They've eradicated all their. Let me look at their record. Let me see their exam.
Well, I mean, if you eradicate all of your past, which is part of this, then do you eradicate your qualifications of being a doctor?
That's right.
Because Miranda or Michelle never did qualify to be a doctor.
No.
Mike did, but not Miranda.
That's right. Yeah.
Or Michelle.
So I can't. And as somebody said about the pension, when does their pension start? They're a different person.
Yes, if that's how far they want to take it, then at least be consistent. And we know this is bonkers, and they don't have to stop people having their pension or eradicate their qualifications, but simultaneously they shouldn't be eradicating something on their file that for many people would be a red flag if they've had a disciplinary hearing or something similar to that. Steve, thank you very much indeed for that. Nige in Cambridgeshire says, I'm broadly okay with the principle, this is the youth mobility thing, but what happens when someone gets married, has a child here, then claims permanent residency under human rights law? Same for Brits abroad. I don't know, that's a good point. I guess there is some room in the statistics that will say, yeah, there might be 1% of people that happens to. There's going to be some, isn't there? I mean, you come over from France or Germany and, you're going to suddenly go, wow, there's a lot of beautiful looking people in the United Kingdom. This is a place of aesthetic beauty. Look at the fizzogs on those Brits, aren't they tasty? And you will fall in love and obviously want to marry, and before you know it, you're happily hitched and you become a resident in some shape or form. I don't know what percentage it would be, but it's a good point to raise. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, and a reminder, time now, and by the way, the Voice of Doom is on its way. Day 4 of the Voice of Doom. Can it go today? Find out in a moment. But right now, find out how you could be in with a chance of winning £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
What Reynolds has done is basically steal their hard work. He's swept in, he's claimed it all in a simple, rhetorical quip. He's claimed things he never achieved. And that's not right. We cannot have government ministers who make false claims to titles they are not entitled to. It is simply wrong.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. It's 10 to 3. We'll go back to the calls in just a couple of moments. Before we do, it's the voice of doom. For those who don't know what the voice of doom is, it's the political mystery. It's a mystery voice with a political thing going on to it. This one's gone on for this is the fourth day on this one. So think politics, someone who is in politics or connected in some shape or form, past or present. Here's the voice that's up and running. Can you tell us who this is?
And see something different.
Now, don't phone in because there ain't no prize, but you can message in if you want to have a crack at this and just simply join in for shizzle and giggles and all the rest of it. Here it is again.
And see something different.
If you think you know, and we get a right answer, on the other side of the news at 3, we will reveal all. If we don't get a right answer, it rolls over to Monday. Here it is again.
And see something different.
87222 if you think you know. And the first one through with the right answer, we will acknowledge, and you walk away with the proud knowledge that you are a winner of The Voice of Doom, the biggest radio feature on national radio on planet Earth. There it is. And who doesn't want that accolade, frankly? Back to your calls. On Ukraine, Mike is in Poole. What have you got for us, Mike? Hello.
Hi, and I just wanted to raise the issue about the corruption in Ukraine. It seems to be endemic in all ex-Soviet countries, as in Romania and Albania. Yep. We know it goes on there. And there's no doubt that they were and possibly are corrupt. But there's no denying they're trying to sort it out. I spent a lot of time in Ukraine before the war started and was witness to things being sorted out with proper documentation.
Sure.
But that's still no excuse to abandon them and to kill and rape people in Bucha.
Indeed. Absolutely spot on. Where do you think Trump is likely to end up on this journey that he's on?
Well, I think he's probably going to end up making them both come to the table, as much as I think Russia should be punished for what they did, or specifically Putin should be punished for what they did. I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. I think there's going to be a pragmatic solution to it where the lines may stay where they are, and the Kursk region will be given back to Russia, and we'll all have to carry on as normal. But I do think there's got to be security guarantees along the lines of what they're saying. If Russia steps out of line again, it's full NATO. As much as I don't like it, I would rather he was punished in some ways. I don't think he is going to be.
No, I sense you might be right on that. Mike, thank you very much indeed for that. Good call. This is Jackie in Oldham on the same issue of Ukraine. Jackie, what have you got for us? Hello.
Hi, Ian.
Hello.
I nearly choked on my cup of tea listening to Bob Seeley with some of the things that he said. I think it's very dangerous for him to have said that Trump is compromised by Putin.
Yes.
If you remember, the last time people accused Trump of that, and he ended up in impeachment proceedings, he was cleared. And I think it's a lazy trope to throw at somebody when you don't like some of the things that somebody is saying.
Yep.
I believe, and we know that when Trump was president in 2016, no wars broke out. He did the Abraham Accords between Israel and Saudi Arabia.
True.
You know, there wasn't any outbreaks. Putin didn't put a foot out of line. And I think he's using reverse psychology. I think that he is luring Putin in to a false sense of security. And I think it is gamesmanship with this. And unfortunately, people are just doing this binary thinking of, Russia bad.
Yeah.
Putin is bad, and I'm not disputing that. But there is a lot more in-depth facts about the Ukraine-Russian war than this invasion.
100%. Yeah, 100% there is. I just realised the word disputing has the word Putin in it. Never thought about that before. There you go. Strange how your brain works. But yeah, I think you're right. There's many components that underline all of this, and we haven't got to half of them. And maybe we never will. Do you think, though, Jackie, that in, come a year's time, this thing will be solved?
Yeah, I do think it will be solved, because the fact is that Putin, he can't afford for this war to go on. Mm-hmm. He's already had to get troops from North Korea. He's also getting missiles ammunition from wherever he can, because he can't keep up with it. I think for Ukraine, it's not a war that they're gonna win, despite European backup with aid and military. And now the US is not sending aid.
Yeah.
There's no way that Europe can make up the shortfall of what America was giving. So I think they will both have to come to the table. They'll both have to give concessions, and I do think we will see peace.
Well, let's hope so, Jackie. Thank you very much indeed, which is going to be the interesting thing that will kind of fly in the face of what a lot of commentators are talking about, that Putin has taken this really weird style. I think some of Trump has taken this really kind of unconventional, I think is the reasonable way to put it, if for no other reason, in the way that he has chosen to articulate his arguments, which I think for many people they've sat up and gone, whoa, hang on, really? So you're saying nothing about Putin and everything about the bloke whose country was invaded, who's a dictator and a half-bit, two-bit comedian and not very good at that. And your Oppo Musk is saying he's feeding off the blood of dead soldiers. I mean, I mean, it's more than unconventional. I don't even think we can imagine Keir waking up and finding out Keir Starmer had said that. We would if nothing else, you'd go, wow, you don't normally hear people talk in these kind of terms. Now, one of the reasons Trump is popular is because he doesn't talk in those kind of terms. That's exactly the point. It's because he isn't any of that lot. He's not the establishment in that sense. He's not the guy that reads off a script that's been cobbled together by a trusty aide who's removed all spirit and dynamism and replaced it with clinical diplomatic language that is sort of replicated on everything that comes out of the gob of any Western politician. He deliberately is not that. That is the point of Trump. So we might not like it, and some people might say, you know, politely, it's a bit unconventional. All the Republicans I'm speaking to are of the same view. They're like, wow, this is a bit weird. You know, we had Republicans overseas on. I mean, there's no group more diehard Republican than them at the beginning of the week. And, you know, the guy we spoke to then said, you know, it's a bit bizarre calling a dictator. It's just mental. So, yes, it hasn't got universal approval. My point is, does that ultimately matter? Now, you could make an argument, construct an intelligent argument that going forward, is that how, you know, we want it to be? Are we going to have, you know, Macron calling Starmer, I don't know, you know, making testicular references to his looks, or is that how it's going to go? Oi, bleep, bleep, as you shout out across the podiums. So the point of all of this is that if Trump, I wouldn't say Trump solves it, but if he orchestrates the solving of it, then we will all be forced to have to go, do you know what? It was a bit weird and wacky and, you know, kind of jaw-dropping, but it worked. And the fact that it worked is really the only question we need to be asking. And I think that's what's upset a lot of the left. It's like, well, surely not. No, there's only one way to do this. And that's the sort of Jacinda Ardern, Justin Trudeau route of things. You know, the certain ways we speak. No, that's all dead now. More coming up on the other side. There's a lot to get through, including the Voice of Doom. Will we get a winner on the Voice of Doom? This is the voice you are having to identify.
And see something different.
If you think you know who that is, do not phone in because there ain't no prize. You can message 87222. Right now, 3 o'clock, let's get the latest news headline.
Across the UK, on on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
3 minutes after 3 o'clock, welcome back to the home of Common Sense. This is Talk. We are talking Britain set to offer the EU an Australian-style youth mobility scheme as part of Keir Starmer's plans for a post-Brexit reset. Starmer smelling a bit of a rat here. Is there something going on? What is Starmer really up to? We'll continue to take your calls on that. Also, Elon Musk accusing Kyiv of being a graft machine feeding off Ukrainian soldiers' deaths, backing Donald Trump's decision to ignore Zelensky in peace talks. We are in extraordinary times, regardless of where you sit politically. And long-running soap Neighbours has been cancelled again, just 2 years after the 40-year-old show was revived by Amazon. They're putting all the eggs, I think, in the James Bond basket, and they can't be mucking around with Antipodean soap operas. Bring back Mrs. Mangle, and it will be a hit, I promise you. Lots to get through. 0344 499 1000. Now, before we talk more on more pressing issues like the potential Brexit reset, let me just remind you, we played you a voice before the news. This is the political mystery voice thing. Here's the voice again.
And see something different.
Do you want to have another listen?
And see something different.
Who is that? These are some of the wrong answers. Caroline Leavitt, no. Ivanka Trump, no. Megyn Kelly, no. Priti Patel, no. Sir Geoffrey Cox. Definitely not. Meghan, yes. Meghan Markle, Caroline Flint, Natalie Bennett, Meg from Family Guy, no. Esther McVeigh, no. Jacinda Ardern, no. Nor was it Stormy Daniels. In fact, we didn't get a right answer. It rolls over to Monday. Have a ponder over the weekend, and we might get a correct answer. The laughing you can hear in the background is former number 10 advisor. He crossed from the Tories over to Reform. He is, of course, Tim Montgomery. Always good to see you, Tim.
Sorry, I was jumping the gun with my giggling.
There was nothing wrong with that at all.
That's quite a hard competition.
It's really hard.
Lots of entries, though.
Well, we have loads of people take part, and then we get the same names repeated every day. But no one so far. It's day 5 on Monday, you see. And do you know what the prize is for this?
Probably, given what I've just spent money on, is it a postage stamp?
Well, come to the... It's not. In fact, it's worth less than a postage stamp because there ain't no prize for this. But you just bought a book of postage stamps.
I know. Well, it's my mum's birthday, and I left it a little bit late, so I needed to buy a first-class stamp.
Yep.
And the little card shop only sells them in a book of 8.
When did that
start? How much do you think a book of 8 first-class stamps?
So in your head, you still sort of romantically, in fiscal terms, you kind of go, it's what, 2 or 3 quid or something?
It was £13.20.
This is outrageous. Precisely. Tim Montgomery has just been robbed in a card shop, everybody.
And I'm so absent-minded, Ian, I probably will now, after I've attached the stamp successfully to my mum's card, I probably will now lose the other 7.
You lose the set.
Yeah,
or
so
you'll
perhaps
find
I
it in
should give
3
them to
years'
you
time.
for
Yes, exactly. I'll look after your stamps.
Because it is ridiculous. Why would anyone send, cards or letters now? The post office, I think, must have their pricing policy wrong because that's extortionate.
It is extortionate. And I've always said the one thing about the post office, which I've never quite got, and I've interviewed lots of post office people over the years, I'm sure, never really remember to ask them this. When email began, you would think that of all the organisations that would have been first in there, the post office, the people that stood the most to lose, we would all have a PO email address, it'd be ian@po.com, because the post office are clearly going to be the biggest losers when it comes to people not sending stuff.
Absolutely. No, it's extraordinary and very sad, really, because a lot of letters still come through my letterbox, but when you see a properly written letter, handcrafted, there's something still very special about it.
There is something about it.
It's a shame the pricing policy is not exactly encouraging it.
Yeah. I mentioned 3 stories at the beginning. The EU reciprocal deal with students, the Musk story, and Donald Trump and all that's going on over there, and the long-running soap Neighbours being cancelled. Of course, of those 3, the one that Tim's here to talk about is Neighbours. I know that how much you are a big Neighbours fan.
I did spend too much time as a student watching it.
We all did it. We all did it. Are you not a soap opera man?
To be honest, I'm not really a TV person anymore. I hardly watch television. I'm very radio, podcasts, and I just find I'm a bit of a fidget, and so I can do other things while I'm
You didn't watch
listening.
the live EastEnders last night?
I certainly didn't.
No, I didn't.
I can remember, though, you know, the Christmases where Dale and Angie were fighting and stuff. Probably dates me. You know, they were appointment television.
They were
for a
appointment
time,
television. She came back, Angie, for this thing. Yeah, she did
really?
a
She was back,
did a
was
little
she?
cameo as a kind of a
Brilliant.
ghost.
Oh, that's nice.
Den, unfortunately, didn't, because he was he's dead. And prior to dying...
Didn't stop Bobby Ewing coming back.
That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. But he had a bit of he got collared by the tabloids, didn't he, Den, during a few years ago?
He was guilty of a crime in Germany, wasn't he?
He killed someone. Literally guilty of murder.
He really was dirty Den.
Only the BBC would have gone, he sounds like a great character to include in our new soap opera. It's,
It should be presenting the news.
He just murdered someone, that's all he did. Let's not worry about it. He was a youngster back then, so he's retired. No, I think he was one of the ones, it might have been, I can't remember which tabloid it was, but he was one of the first people I can ever remember reading caught on the old webcam ruse doing something he shouldn't be doing. So, yeah.
Well, you've got a very good memory.
I remember that story thinking, what, Den? Really? Him? Dirty Den? Anyway, we're not here to talk about Dirty Den, Tim. We are here to talk about Britain's offer, or set to offer, European countries this Australian-type youth mobility scheme. Number of arrivals capped to control immigration figures, but it does come as Keir Starmer is attempting, of course, to, well, somehow have a reset with the EU. I think I'm right in saying that this story of this student, 18 to 30s, moving around, I think Rishi Sunak had a dalliance with this as well, didn't he?
I think he did, but I think there's been a lot of interest in this idea from politicians over a while, but I think it was only a few months ago that this story came up, and Labour absolutely denied that they were interested in this.
Yes.
And for good reason, because Keir Starmer was an advocate of complete free movement when he was Shadow Brexit Secretary. And he's made the right decision before the election that people had had enough about the European question, and it was right that a government that he led focused on the bread and butter issues that, more people... And yet again, Ian, he has broken that undertaking. And look, there are merits on both sides. A narrow freedom of movement policy, I can see the advantages of it. But it's the trust problem. And
100%.
Will this be the end of the policy or the beginning?
Or the beginning of something else.
Once I think you've opened the door to restoring freedom of movement, the stipulations that are specified at the moment, it's only for 18 to 13-year-olds, it's capped, and etc., etc.
Sure.
Those will slowly go, because we know from his record, Keir Starmer believes in freedom of movement. And freedom of movement was rejected by the British people because it particularly hurt people at the bottom of the pile, lower income workers who weren't so mobile, the very people Labour used to represent.
Absolutely.
So, I'm Reform supporter now, as you mentioned.
Indeed.
I don't want this policy, but my goodness, this is another gift for Nigel Farage, because
100%.
he will be able to trade on this in all those 90-odd northern seats where Reform is second place to Labour.
And also, Tim, the other alarming figure, which rather feeds into what you were just saying, they're talking about this figure of a 70,000 cap. Now, obviously, we already have this deal with Australia. Australia has a smaller population compared to the entirety of the EU. If we were to kind of do a pro rata thing and work out a proportion, that the same proportion of EU 18 to 30-year-olds could come here as the same proportion as Australian ones, we would be giving out 750,000 of these visas. So, I mean, that takes us to where the concern would be. Is it the beginning of a policy?
And it'll absolutely be denied. The most grave voice in the House of Commons. We are only doing a very modest policy.
Absolutely.
But once that modest policy has been introduced and the tension moves on to other things, it'll be a place where they really expand that scheme because that's their instincts.
Absolutely. Let's move on to this story. Curious things going on in the White House, and you know,
curiouser and curiouser. Yeah.
Diplomatic language has now taken a whole new chapter. Forget those shiny press releases that special advisors used to write and say, "Go, Prime Minister or President, read this. It's nice and clinical. It doesn't insult anybody." That's all gone. These guys shoot from the hip, whether it's Musk, whether it's Trump, and of course they've called, as we know, in the last couple of days, Zelensky is a dictator. He's a half-baked comedian, and goodness knows what else. He's got no mandate, etc. And then Musk has sort of fed into this today, saying, and almost taking it to another level, saying that Zelensky is a fraud machine feeding off the dead bodies of soldiers. I mean, this is another territory. This stuff.
I'm not shocked by much in politics, but this has been extraordinary. And a week or so ago, when Trump sort of made this sort of announcement that he'd been talking to Russia and they were going to have talks without Ukraine, I was shocked and disappointed. But often with Trump, he says things and then his advisors row him back. He talks all the time to big crowds and sometimes doesn't always mean everything that he says. But we've had a week now of this, and every day there's more to it. This is absolutely where Trump wants to go, and I wanted Trump to become president. I think he's done lots of good things, but this is absolutely indefensible. We shouldn't even be neutral between Russia and Ukraine. We absolutely should be condemning the aggressor. In fact, the leader of supposedly the free world is actually repeating Kremlin propaganda points. I still have a lot of admiration for Trump, but I cannot defend this in any way. And we all have our different ways of remembering this conflict. But my memory was an interview with a mother, a Ukrainian mother, difficult even talking about it. And she just lost her son, murdered by Russian soldiers. She was outside her home, and these same Russian soldiers were still there. They'd ransacked her home, and they had a campfire burning, and they were singing drunken songs celebrating what they had done.
That's extraordinary.
And that has happened, and there are how many stories are there like that because of what Putin did. And it cannot be acceptable for Trump to continue to pursue this policy because somehow Zelensky might have offended him in the past. And Elon Musk, a great man in so many respects, but when are these grown-ups going to actually stand up to Trump and say, no, this bullying, this moral cowardice is un-American, unacceptable and undemocratic? I think it's more important that friends of people normally sympathetic to Trump say this as loudly as the usual critics.
You're a Reform Party member now.
Yeah, sorry, that was a bit of a soapbox, wasn't it?
It was fabulous, Tim. It was fabulous. Yesterday, you put out a tweet urging the leadership of Reform to, make a statement on this, because Reform, if anyone has closest ties with Trump, it's Reform, particularly Nigel Farage's got a personal relationship, it seems, with Mr. Trump. A couple of hours after you put that out, Nigel did speak and he said, look, take Trump, always take him seriously, don't always take him literally. Was that good enough for you?
It was good enough, and it has to be in the context of what Nigel Farage said earlier in the week, which was that he supports Ukraine becoming a NATO member. Now, that's a big commitment, and for all those who say that Reform is an isolationist party that sucks up to Moscow, well, one thing Moscow absolutely does not want is Ukraine joining NATO. So I wish Nigel Farage had been a little bit quicker. We had almost 24 hours of the usual suspects and Reform's critics saying, why the silence? I think it was partly explained by actually Nigel Farage was on the other side of the Atlantic and was travelling. But in politics, 24 hours is a very long time.
It certainly is.
And Reform cannot allow critics to paint it as somehow morally indifferent to this issue. Because one thing that makes me proud to be British is actually, unlike almost every other major country in the world, we don't have a party that opposes this war. The public is largely supportive of this war and actually think if they had to choose between backing Ukraine and our special relationship with America, they'd choose backing Ukraine. So Reform it's morally right that they take this position, but it'd be politically stupid as well to side with the Kremlin.
But could it be, Tim, and I've been trying to raise this point throughout the course of the programme, that, you know, Trump is unconventional, he doesn't go from sort of pre-rehearsed scripts, as we were just saying.
Yeah.
He's playing a deeper game here. There's a kind of whole kind of chess scenario going on. Now, what goes against that theory is that I think Putin, if anyone, was going to spot that. But he's playing a game, and in a year's time, you and I will be sitting here going, do you know what? That was the weirdest thing ever. Trump said some very odd things, very bizarre, not the sort of things you normally hear from a president. Musk said even more bizarre things. But you know what? It's solved. It's sorted. Well, in which case, we'll be sitting here going, do you know what? It didn't matter.
Well, Vice President Vance has said that if ultimately Russia doesn't play ball, the White House will impose stricter sanctions on Russia and will punish them. But that still doesn't excuse, back to my Ukrainian mother.
Yeah.
She's being told that somehow her government and her struggle is illegitimate, and she is not the absolute victim. Somehow Putin is. That can't be washed away, and it's succor to every dictator and every tyrant, I'm afraid. And I want America to be focused on China, which I think is the main aggressor, and perhaps that's what ultimately Trump wants to get to. But no apologies for Kremlin should have been made.
Just a final one here, Tim, while you are with us. The BBC and this curious Gaza documentary they somehow put together. We reported on this yesterday. It's now been pulled from iPlayer, never to be seen again, and rightly so. Essentially, it was just a kind of Gazan propaganda, or a Hamas propaganda piece almost. It was fronted by a child who was 13. He was the narrator. Turns out his dad was a senior terrorist in Hamas. There are various other elements to this story. I think the cameraman who would follow them around had been tweeting on October the 7th celebratory noises about what had happened. This is an absolute mess for the BBC. I think this goes beyond, oh, it was just a bit of an error, or we're really sorry. I mean, this is howling blunders, one after the other, from an organisation that should know better. And, of course, the BBC's claim was they didn't know.
Well, are you surprised, Ian?
No, I'm not really.
Because fundamentally, I'm afraid I'm not. The BBC does many good things, but it's not a friend of Israel. It hasn't been fair to Israel over and look, that's absolutely beyond the pale. But Jeremy Bowen, the BBC's foreign editor, he is almost a relentless regurgitator of Hamas's talking points. He does it more subtly than that documentary, but in a way he's more dangerous because of his, global footprint.
He would say, hang on a sec, Tim, I'm not here to defend myself, firstly. He'd say, all journalistic standards are met. That's the BBC line, isn't it? This always comes back.
Well, he used a word beginning with C on Twitter to describe me recently, so we have bit of a...
How dare you, Mr. Bowen?
We have a bit of a history.
So there's a journalistic inaccuracy there for a start.
Well,
so
thank you.
We've got him on rule one.
So we have a little bit of history, but Israel is not a perfect country, and it's hard to defend some of what they've done in this war. But when you are constantly under attack, when you are surrounded by people who want to wipe you off the face of the planet, they have been at war effectively for 50 years. They make mistakes, and a lack of empathy from the BBC for that democracy in the Middle East is very regrettable, particularly seeing we have to pay for it.
Indeed. I mean, if it was a private organisation, we'd be having a slightly different conversation. We'd just say we'll opt out. They're not to be trusted. We don't believe them. Their journalism is sloppy, and it's demonstrably sloppy. Here's an hour-long documentary, and the fact that their argument was that we didn't know about it makes it 1,000 times worse. If they haven't got fact checkers and people that are meant to oversee this, and it would have been very easy, would it not? At a meeting, you see this sort of fairly erudite young 13-year-old who's a very good presenter, by the way, and you think, wow, this kid's good. He speaks great English, very fluent, clearly a bright kid. Where did you get him from? Wouldn't that be the first question over there at BBC HQ? They might have asked someone. So whoever put it together, I don't know if people will walk the plank. The normal
I suspect not.
I was about to say, that's the normal thing. Nobody walks the plank. They'll say lessons will be learned.
Junior heads will roll, perhaps.
Yes, yes, that's right. Some poor person on the reception that loses a job for putting a phone call through when they shouldn't have done. Tim, it's great to see you. Happy birthday to your mum, by the way.
I hope she's not listening to this, because she will be very disappointed that again I have left it till the last minute.
But it will get there. It's all right. 13 quid well spent. Tim Montgomery with us here on Talk.
Reynolds has done is basically steal their hard work. He's swept in, he's claimed it all in a simple, rhetorical quip. He's claimed things he never achieved. And that's not right. We cannot have government ministers who make false claims to titles they are not entitled to. It is simply wrong.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is interesting and potentially disturbing, and I hope I can put this together in the right order. So a bit of breaking news here that Apple have pulled its data protection tool after a UK government security row. Apple is taking the unprecedented step of removing its highest level data security tool for customers in the UK after the government demanded access to user data. Now, even that sentence in itself, you go, where's this, China or North Korea? No, UK. Advanced data protection means only account holders can view items such as photos or documents that they have stored online through a process known as end-to-end encryption. But earlier this month, the UK government asked for the right to see the data, which currently not even Apple can see. It means eventually no UK customer data stored on iCloud, Apple's storage unit, will be encrypted, making it all accessible by Apple and shareable with law enforcement if they have a warrant. Now, I think I've got this bit right. So that bit is correct, okay? There is something called the Data Use and Access Bill. Now, you might not follow me on social media. If you don't follow me, I should in fact pin the tweet. I don't tweet loads. on X, but maybe I should. It's one of the last things I tweeted, and it's a guy explaining. We have to get this guy on. We've got to get this fella on. I'll try and find the bloke's name, because his name is Bruce Unfiltered. Bruce Unfiltered. There we go, guys. Bruce Unfiltered. He's obviously got a YouTube channel. And I wrote, this is worth 6 minutes of your time. Not sure who this guy is, but he's good. The question is, could there be a good or logical reason for data harvesting from a government? So essentially, this is something called, as I said, the Data Use and Access Bill, which, based on what he is saying, which is why I'm desperate to find a counter-argument so I don't lose sleep at night believing I live in a real dystopian world. No one is, as Bruce says in his video, no one's really talking about this, certainly not in mainstream media, and yet, based on his video, it looks like one of the biggest stories that we will have ever seen in terms of privacy and our relationship with the state. And that is that everything you do or have ever done will be, the government will have the ability to track every single website you've ever seen, every single journey you've ever, every single purchase you've ever made, the whole thing, every bit of data, all crunched into a nice little algorithm. So they will know what your spending is, because you spend online, you spend through Apple Pay or Google Pay, whatever it's called. You do all of that. The websites you visit, so the web, Google and the like, will have to share that information. So they'll have that, they'll have your spending, they'll have where you've been, what have you got stored in the iCloud, they'll have all of that there as well, from your photos through to anything else, HMRC, your water bills, your, you name, the whole thing, all clustered into one. So if they then fast forward a couple of years, you know, click a couple of buttons, put a name in, Julia Hartley Brewer, straight away profile comes up. This is what you do. It might even give you a rating. I don't know what it will do. Why do they want it? Why do they want that much? It's all to do with digital kind of ID. I don't, is any MP opposing this? Is there a member of parliament anywhere opposing this? It looks massive to me. I want to talk about it. Can we try and get Bruce on next week, Finn? Or Adam? Just, let's see if we can. But I think we'll have to, it'd be great if we could. But we will counter it, because like all of these things, sometimes things look very sinister. I'm really clutching at straws on this. And other times somebody comes along and goes, no, 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 no. It ain't for that. It's for this. It's to catch the bad people, isn't it? But all of that to catch the bad... And by the way, it's not going forward, it's backwards as well. So they can go back as long as they like and go, yeah, all of the stuff you looked at in 1990 and onwards, it's all there on the database. Okay? That's a different way of living. And Apple, of course, were one of, I'm sure there are others, but they were going, no, you're not having the iCloud access. We don't even know what's in it ourselves. They've now rolled over. I was really hoping that would be the point when the government would go, yeah, we're taking this a bit far. So Apple have gone, yeah, you can see the data of other people. Of course you can. Is that really how it should be? More of that on the way. Back to your calls. Jason in Sheffield. How you doing, Jason?
Yeah, not too bad. What I'd like to say is we've got this Trump-Zelensky-Ukraine thing going on.
Yes.
What I'd like to say is, what is Trump doing now, or saying what he didn't say while he was running to be president? He said he would
sort it out in a day.
Stop war. Well, it was a day. Yeah, it's a bit far-fetched, but he is trying to stop it, to be fair to him. So that's a truth. He wants to make America great again, which he's doing by not sending 350 billion quid to Ukraine. I mean, 350... We seem to have forgotten how much a billion quid is now, don't we?
Yeah.
It's 350,000 million quid is...
a lot of quids.
Well, yeah, it is, yeah. You wouldn't get that 100 mattress, would you?
Not really, unless you had a very big old mattress.
But
dreams do some beauties.
Yeah. Yeah, dreams. You can the thing is, he's doing what he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's doing what he said he... But you're absolutely right. But did people think for 1 second that he would sideline Zelensky in this?
Well...
They might have done. Some people might have taken it from that.
The thing is with Zelensky is, we don't know what they know. We don't know what.
That's very true. That's very true. So, are they playing? Yeah, no, it's true. I keep coming back, Jason, to this phrase. I know it's sounding boring now. You know, is it a chess game? But that's really as near as I can get to understanding what's happening.
But the thing is, because he's doing what he said he'd do, basically, people are up in arms for a politician from telling the truth in what he's going to do if he gets into power.
No, I hear it. I hear you. Listen, great call. Jason, thank you very much. He did say he was going to do this. I think where some people might take issue on the point that Jason is not unreasonably making is that maybe some people didn't expect it was going to happen in this kind of way. We'll continue to take your calls, 0344 499 1000. If you want to see the video that and again, I have to put a little journalistic caveat in here. We've been talking about journalism and the BBC, so it's only right that I tell you, if you want to see it I've just pinned it as the pinned tweet on my Twitter feed. So if you're not following me, follow me at Ian Collins UK. That's at Ian Collins UK. And it's the pinned tweet. Now, this is one man's interpretation of what he believes the bill is about. So I'm going to caveat it with that, because there may be others who say, yeah, I know it looks all sinister, governments have done this forever, nothing new here, it's just an extension of XYZ, and it'll turn out to be for the common good. So I'm saying that because I can't have a swipe at the BBC every half an hour and not cover my own butt if it comes to something like this. The guy is great in delivering his analysis of what he thinks the Data Use and Access Bill is, which, by the way, you can look that up online and it will tell you everything. It's about 270 pages if you've got a spare couple of days and maybe a good beer to read it. But if you want to check out the video, it's about 6 minutes long. It's on my pinned tweet. Follow me at Ian Collins UK and you can see it there. Just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This comes in from Carol, who says, my goodness, I've heard these sort of stories before, and I'm so sorry to have to relay this, but Carol did send it in because I think it's interesting information. It does, to some degree, feed into something I just mentioned about data protection. My partner died, and I did not know his passwords. To get hold of his iCloud content, I need a court order. I have probate and need a barrister, and has to go to the High Court, around about £10,000, as if I'm not sad enough. Will this now change? And you know what? It probably won't, based on what I'm reading. I'm so sorry to hear, firstly, for your loss, but secondly, the difficulty in trying to access this. I know lots of people have made the same arguments, haven't they, about just seeing photographs. Sometimes you might want official documentation. There might be statements. You do everything online now. And Google's and Apple and others, Apple are not alone in this, are unable to help you. Particularly if you've bought loads of music as well, because you no longer, when you die, you don't own that music, I think I'm right in saying. So you might have bought, paid for thousands of pounds over the years of downloads of movies and albums and God knows what. But when you go, it doesn't pass over like your vinyl collection to your partner. All of that's a bit weird and dark, isn't it? If we find out differently, Carol, we will let you know. We're certainly going to try and do more on the show on this one. Now, Neighbours. Everybody needs good neighbours. Yeah, that Neighbours, the TV show, has been axed again. What the heck is going on over there in Ramsay Street? Just 2 years after Amazon revived the iconic Aussie soap. The final episode of the 40-year series will air in December 2025, so later this year. Meanwhile, Amazon have now taken control of the James Bond franchise, holding the power to choose the next 007, though we're still waiting on details about the next film. Let's speak with Vicky Mitzi, the entertainment journalist. Vicky, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to have you with us. We've all got
good to be here.
Most of us have got a kind of Neighbours reference of some point, either the point you started watching it, or you never did watch it. I've even been to Ramsay Street. What about that, Vicky?
Have you?
I've actually been there. Yeah, I've been to Erinsborough.
What am I doing here then?
I don't know. I've been to Erinsborough High, the school, and what was the other? There was another part of where they filmed. Yeah, I've been there. I'm trying to think. It's called something like Oak Drive, the actual name of the road, but. Yeah, I've been down there. Oh. I wasn't in the episode. Are you a Neighbours, or were you a Neighbours watcher?
I think this is more painful for people who used to be Neighbours watchers back in the day, as they say. When did you go there? 15 years ago, something like that, maybe more. And why?
It's Pin Oak Court. Why did I go? No, I was in Australia anyway, so I was there, and I thought, I've got to go. And somebody said to me, you've been on the Neighbours tour? And I went, you're kidding. You literally get in a bus and they play the theme tune in the bus. I'm not kidding you. It's a bit cringe. But when I got there, I thought, it's Mrs. Mangle's house. I can't believe that, there's Madge and Harold's place. Kylie used to take her bike out of that garage. It was a bit bizarre. And having been to the Coronation Street set, which kind of for some reason didn't seem as weird. I think it's because I was so far away that Neighbours seemed such a distant land when I was watching it back in the day, that I kind of, it was a moment. It was a kind of big moment. So were you ever a fan?
I did enjoy it when I was a student.
Yeah, everybody says that, don't they? When I was a student, it became a thing to watch.
It was a thing when I didn't have very much else to do. Let me just put it that way. Sorry, apologies.
That's all right.
Die-hard Neighbours fans.
Yeah.
But it is a bit of a shocker, though, because it's sort of bouncing back again.
Yeah,
I
indeed.
find that news quite odd.
That's
where are we now?
And I'm about to compound my Neighbours credentials here, by the way, because I've interviewed a few of the.
You're doing well.
Interviewed a few of the characters from Neighbours over the years, but I went out for a drink with a friend one night, and he said, we're in a pub in Camden, which for those who don't know is in North London, and I turn up at this pub, and he's there with Mark Little, who was Joe Mangle in Neighbours, and I thought, okay, I'm having a beer with Joe Mangle. This is absolutely mad. And he was a really lovely guy, but he was a bit
Which pub was it? Can you say?
Well, it was the sort of a pub that's very well known. Amy Winehouse used to drink there. You'll know the one I'm talking about, I'm sure.
I think I know the one you're talking about. But it sounds like your life's more of a soap opera than this.
Yes, indeed. Yes, sponsored by the Hawley Arms, I think. There you go. I've said it. So, but listen, it's going again. They bought it back on Amazon, and now they're getting rid of it.
In some way, in the back of my mind, it had sort of gone, sadly.
Yeah.
But I think some people are quite cross about this, and I think people might be shouting at their radios and tellies right now because of this. It is a bit of an emotional pinball game with fans. But, for me, I got what I wanted out of it. I got, as you say, the stars. Guy Pearce will forever be known. He's a great actor, but he's Mike from Neighbours.
Yeah.
That's it.
Alan Dale.
Madge and Harold. Exactly.
Yeah. Madge and Harold. I only read yesterday that Harold's not too well these days, but
he's not.
He died in Neighbours, didn't he? Didn't he come back or something? He came back, he fell off a cliff and then returned.
I think you're a secret.
What,
a
he got
secret
washed
fan.
out? I know, it does sound like I have. I genuinely haven't seen it for absolutely yonks, but I really got into it at one point. The Guy Pearce sort of era. Kylie was a mechanic, wasn't she, I think? Craig McLachlan, who was went on to have a sort of slightly limited music career. He was in there. He was her brother.
Robbie.
Was it Margot Robbie? That's right.
Margot Robbie.
Yeah, Margot Robbie.
Which I wasn't watching at that point, but I would have liked to. I love her.
She used to live in Clapham, apparently.
Did she?
Yeah. Not when she was filming Neighbours.
It was
too far to go to work, but...
Not too far for you to pop up.
Absolutely.
Were you
right.
in the background?
No, I wish I was. I wish I was. Apparently they get paid a tidy sum, the people whose homes that are used for the... Because it's only the outside shots of the... was it Pine Oak Street? Oh, Pin Oak, that's it, yeah. I've got a picture of me holding the street sign somewhere, but...
yeah, they get it for now.
I know, I should have had it right for now.
You've got
They've
to
been
tweet
brilliant.
that.
If I can find it, I will. They get paid a reasonable amount, apparently, for just having the front of their house filmed. Because once a week, they're obviously there.
Just the front, not for the interior. The interior set.
Yeah, the interior is obviously a set.
You're really a mine of information.
Yeah, I don't know why. I could have just interviewed myself on this, couldn't I? That's what I should have done. But it does.
The other way around.
And of course, Amazon was on at the same. Sorry, just before Home and Away. Did you ever get into that?
No, I was actually quite. I was loyal to Neighbours at least.
Yeah, I never really did. I did a bit of Home and Away, and I interviewed a couple of those guys. I can't remember the girl's name. Was it Billy or Bobby? Bobby in Home and Away. Do you remember Bobby Adams? She was one of the big characters in there. Everybody remember Bobby. She came over to the UK, and she came into the radio studio, and she was panicked like mad. And she said, "I'm really worried because I've lost my boyfriend." And I said, "Okay, what do you mean?" She says, "Well, he was meant to meet us here at the studio, and he hasn't shown up." Halfway through the interview, he walks in, and she then proceeds to snog the face off this guy for about 7 minutes. And I'm sitting there going, it's bloody
Was
Bobby.
that during on air?
No, it was it was pre-recorded, thankfully. She goes, "Oh, do you mind if I just go and see my boyfriend?" Or I think it was her husband, actually. I think she got married quite young. So they start having this snogathon in the studio, and I'm thinking, okay, that's fine. I'm looking at my watch going, all right, that's fine. I am literally sitting here, guys, while you're, having a snog fest. All of that aside, it brings us back to Amazon, of course, because that's where Neighbours went. Maybe they were hoping for a big international audience, because Neighbours was obviously big in Australia, massive in the UK. I'm sure there were some other countries where it did well, but predominantly, obviously, Australia and the UK. Perhaps they thought Amazon would take it to a more of an international level. I don't know. What is going to change, though, for Amazon, and is a big deal, is the fact they now own James Bond. Now, that is a big deal.
Well, what I do think is interesting about the... Sorry, I know that I'm sort of pinging back to Neighbours again, but it was it fell through, allegedly, due to a deal with Fremantle not being on the right terms.
Yes.
So that's why, these things are always about money. But with Bond, I kind of think it's not necessarily reflecting. I think all these things are business, aren't they? And with Bond, it's just a story in its own right, isn't it? This happening that, I'm not going to say it's shaking, not stirring the entertainment industry, of course. But yeah, I think Amazon MGM are kind they redeeming themselves with this one, aren't they?
It's going to be, it's a big deal for them, of course. Do we need to do they need to go back to basics? We do want an obvious, good-looking bloke. We don't want to see his feminine side. We want to see a bloke that smokes and drinks. And did we just see Daniel Craig in his shorts?
Can anyone beat that one, though, seriously? Apparently, there's something I heard on the radio. Go for it! I was just...
I'm going to be too busy in Melbourne filming the last episodes of Neighbours, so I might not be up for it.
About this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Should it go back to that, though? This was a guy that liked to drink, and, he was a woman's man, or a man's woman, whatever you want to call it, man's man, and women loved him. He was all of that, and, of course, he was a great spy, and he knew how to fight. He was a tough guy.
Do you like the Bond thing.
Well,
Have
I
you read the
haven't.
book?
I didn't. I'm trying to remember if I've seen the last Daniel Craig one. I must have done. No, maybe I didn't. I didn't really.
See, I think that's telling in itself, Ian.
Yeah, you might be
Really.
right. I don't think I noticed that the last one had meant to have gone. They were removing all the toxic masculinity and making him a more caring, understanding character.
Oh, I
the
see.
The last Bond
Okay.
movie I saw, I don't remember clocking that. I thought Daniel Craig was just like the others in the sense that he's a striking looking guy who was big and tough and still liked to drink, and I don't think he smoked though.
I didn't see Daniel Craig like that necessarily.
Us entertainment journalist with us on the programme, bit of Neighbours thrown in there, too much Neighbours maybe, and also some James Bond too. 0344 499 1000. Now, before we continue, we'll come back to your calls in a moment. Time to find out how you could be in with a mighty chance of winning £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by...
This bald guy with a thick facial hair and lots of wrinkles all over his face is indeed a child, and now his asylum application will proceed as such, so he will be treated as a minor. All of these cases that we talk about, they always involve the Home Office saying, no, deport this person, that person is not a child. Then the Home Office decision gets appealed against. The Home Office is not to blame here. It's another mad moron of a tribunal immigration judge.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Let's go back to it. Adam is in Nottingham. On Bond, Adam, what are you thinking? Good afternoon to you.
Well, it's a case of watch this space with Amazon, because everyone was freaking out about Daniel Craig. You can't have a blonde Bond, but then everyone shut their mouth when Daniel Craig came along.
True.
But what people got to understand is Daniel Craig is a very different Bond. Sean Connery, Roger Moore, all set in the same universe. Daniel Craig Bond's not set in that universe. It's not a follow-on from their films. He is a unique Bond, and the only difference is he's still cool, cold and calculated.
Yeah.
But the difference is Daniel Craig gave him the ability to love women. He fell in love with the women
which never really happened with previous.
No, because basically Bond is, borderline psychopath. Yeah. You got to understand he can go in, do his job.
100%. And I think probably when it was Ian Fleming wrote it, I'd imagine he would say, yeah, that's exactly who he is.
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, and you going on about Sean Connery not being the best actor. He was handpicked by, I think it was Ian Fleming's wife, or the producer's wife, to be that thing. And Ian Fleming liked him so much that the previous books he wrote in, she wrote in the Scottish heritage, which wasn't in the books before, but only
that's
after Sean Connery. Only after Sean Connery. And then obviously Roger Moore came along, more Campion, which is also one of my favourite Bonds, and everything, and then then Lazenby, then Roger Moore, then Timothy Dalton, and but the thing, what I want to say is as well, yes, it may be in part American hands and everything, and see what they do with it, but we can't get up in arms whether they're going to put an American in there playing a British fighter. We can't, because we've got this great thing with America, with British actors in American movies, and you Batman, Spider-Man, all of these people, they're British. Tom Holland is British. Yeah. The guy playing Venom is British.
That's very true. But then it's this. I missed about 10 minutes of Roger Moore's life, and they had his sons on it. I don't know if you saw this, Adam. His sons were annoyingly good looking as well, and clearly from a very quite wealthy family. Obviously, the old man did all right. But yeah, his life, Roger Moore's life, was kind of like a bit of a Bond, like without the guns. He was that suave, sophisticated, and then he got the Saint, didn't he? That was the job that, in TV terms, sealed him. That went international. So, it was he had a very good life, Roger Moore. I don't think he had any complaints about anything. But it's got to be that type, hasn't it? And similarly with Connery, right?
Yeah. I mean, he played Bond really well, and he had that borderline psychopathic nature brought that to him, where he could love a woman and then suddenly turn around and say, "You're the spy, and I'm gonna strangle the truth out." Yeah. I know. At the end of the day, it worked. You could disagree with it or anything, but it made a man watches it and great, this is a great movie. I'd love to be that. Obviously not that. Women watch it all. I want that, but I'm strangely attracted to him. And
I get it.
There's all that there, and it is a great British institute. But it is going to be a case of watch this space, see what they do with it. If they do anything good with it, I'm all for it. Same with Daniel Craig. I mean, I never made one comment. Same with Trump. You're talking about Trump. Same with Trump. Let's not say anything and just watch what they do.
And see what happens. And Daniel Craig didn't disappoint, took it slightly differently, as you rightly say. We will watch with interest. Adam, thank you. We hit the clock. That's why I've got to move. One here quickly. Jason in Hastings says, enjoying the show. I'm in the exact situation as one of your listeners has just mentioned. I recently lost my partner, and getting access to her digital data accounts is an absolute nightmare. You would think that a PDF of the death certificate should be enough for tech companies to release files, especially as they can easily check the authenticity of it by checking the death register, which is a public document. It seems hurdles are being placed to make a difficult time even harder. What disappoints me, Jason, and again, I'm sorry to hear of your loss, which is compounded by, having to get through and jump through hoops. People talked about this 10 or 15 years ago, and you'd think by now they would have sorted this. Apparently not, Peter.
And the point is that the government has this thing called Tell Us Once, where you put in all the information once, and hopefully, and the idea is that it deals with all the government agencies. But there are lots of things. I have a friend actually bereaved very recently, and just the amount of time he has spent, and his family has spent on the phone to broadband providers and various people, just getting direct debits changed and things like that. They call it grief min. Unfortunately, it's a horrible thing.
Just briefly, you're a political anorak. I mean, you wouldn't think that from our text exchanges last night, but that's another story. The data use and access bill, are you familiar with this? What's happening here?
I'm aware that it's a thing.
We can get into all your... Yeah, I think we